A white bird perches on a sword amidst a frozen graveyard. The lone bird watches over the silent, snowy fortress ruins. The blonde-haired man exhales a cloud of frost. He stands resolute, wearing lion-themed white armor. A massive orc army looms over the lone warrior. History recalls a long era defined by catastrophic events. A silver-haired warrior carves through endless waves of war. A legendary red-haired knight rises to defeat massive foes. A lone hero rushes toward a city consumed by flames. At history's center lies the demonic sword, Grufon. In the present, the blonde-haired man faces his battle. A distant tower glows under the heavy, falling snow. Surrounded by monsters, the lone knight prepares to strike. A brutal strike finishes off a fallen enemy soldier. A massive orc leader bellows a thunderous, terrifying roar.
The knight stands firm as blue energy ignites around him.
A sudden, powerful boom echoes as blue flames erupt. His blue eyes gleam with a sharp, focused intensity. Narration describes blood-stained ramparts within the frozen valleys. Magical flames flicker over the armor of a fallen soldier.
A knight kneels as the mystical blue aura surges.
A soldier sounds a horn to signal the final charge. Armored warriors rally as blue energy wraps around them. His companions look on as the blonde-haired man smiles. A massive vortex of blue energy consumes the entire battlefield. Spectral knights charge forward, empowered by the intense light. The blonde-haired man lunges with incredible speed and power. A golden sword shines, representing heroes now forgotten. He offers a confident smirk amidst the chaotic fighting. The knight effortlessly cleaves through the green-skinned monstrous horde.
Blood spatters as his allies arrive to join the fray.
A piece of dark armor shattered by force spins away. The sword recalls his past masters and their many disciples. A dark armored warrior delivers a lethal blow to an orc.
The narrative reflects on the legends achieved by past masters.
A brown-haired warrior grips her sword with glowing eyes. She delivers a devastating slash to a giant enemy. The blonde-haired man wipes away blood with a calm expression. His blue eye reflects the cold light of battle. He stands tiny but defiant before the towering orc leader. The giant monster unleashes a final, desperate roar. A flash of blue light reflects in a wide eye. The blonde-haired man readies his blade for a final strike. A powerful slash cuts deep into the giant orc leader. The massive beast looks on in shock as he falls. The knight stands victorious as the giant monster is defeated. He looks toward the horizon with a satisfied, weary smile. A golden sword rests peacefully in a sunlit meadow. The soul within narrates its reincarnation into a sword. The sword recalls creating legendary heroes over many centuries. The blonde knight recalls a friend. Young Leonberger begins his humble journey. He battles through endless monster hordes. A green monster shrieks in fury. The companions travel across the world. They achieve legendary, unmatched heroic feats. Dark storms gather over frozen mountains. A massive explosion of magic erupts. The battered knight grips his blade. He kneels in the frozen wasteland. A colossal black dragon suddenly appears. The dragon readies a breath attack. He braces for the dragon's strike. A powerful energy beam blasts forward. His sword pulses with blue magic. Magic swirls around the lone warrior. He encourages his friend to increasingly charge. He releases a massive blue aura. He lunges forward with magical speed. The dragon roars during the clash. He readies the sword for victory. Sharp slashes carve through the air. The dragon is sliced into pieces. They successfully defeat the frost dragon. His friend becomes the nation's ruler. The sword becomes a legendary relic. Gruhan is tasked with watching descendants. A long, silent era passes by. Gruhan wakes up to loud noises. The sword complains about the handling. Adrian Leonberger claims the sword despite a guard's frantic protests that only the king may touch it. The guard pleads for its return. Gruhan is confused by the boy. The arrogant prince asserts his absolute authority over everything in the country, while Gruhan observes his unsightly appearance.
The sword senses something deeply wrong.
Gruhan uses an authority called examination. The system reveals Adrian's status as an obese, talentless, and lazy 16-year-old with numerous flaws. Gruhan realizes this disappointing boy is his old friend's descendant. The prince struggles to lift the weapon, hoping to finally gain respect from the nobility. He vows to be ignored no more. Gruhan mocks the prince's absurd delusions. The prince begs the dragon slayer for power, but Gruhan refuses to help such an unworthy person. He screams the name of the sword. A terrified Kaya sounds as the prince swings the weapon wildly, ignoring guards who warn him not to draw it in the palace. He threatens to kill anyone who dares to order him around. The prince trips and falls while ranting about gaining power to crush those he considers trash. He gasps as he loses balance. The prince falls onto his own blade. A maid lets out a shocked huff as she witnesses the tragedy. Panic erupts as people call for the prince. Brown-haired maids and silver-armored guards surround the fallen blonde-haired prince as a soldier frantically shouts to call for a physician. Bleeding from his mouth, the blonde-haired man realizes with shock that his consciousness has somehow entered the body of the scoundrel who was stabbed by the legendary sword. His vision begins to blur. He fears he will soon faint. The kingdom's future remains uncertain. The narration describes a prince who inherited no noble qualities and prioritized his own arrogance and greed above all else in the kingdom. He was known as Adrian Leonberger, the first prince of the realm, and characterized as a stupid, lazy, and brutal glutton. Strange rumors began to spread throughout the castle after the prince was stabbed and miraculously woke from the brink of death. Maids whisper that Prince Adrian has been acting differently lately, noting that he no longer flips dinner tables or gathers with his usual bad crowd. They laugh and speculate that even the infamous prince might finally know shame or be acting out of fear, though they expect him to eventually return to his old ways. The blonde-haired man sits on his throne in shock as he realizes that he accidentally killed his old friend's descendant and has now stolen the boy's body. A loud voice from outside the chamber announces that His Majesty has arrived and orders everyone to fix their clothing and prepare to receive the king. The blonde-haired man grumbles about why the king is visiting now when he didn't even show up while the prince was dying, as a maid warns him that the palace knights have arrived. A gray-haired man in a red cloak enters and sternly warns the prince to watch his words and actions. The gray-haired man notes that while the prince came back from death's door, his foul temper remains exactly the same. The gray-haired man tells the maid she can leave and notes that the king doesn't have any expectations anyway, leaving the blonde-haired man wondering who this new person is. The man reminds the prince that they have a teacher-student relationship and asks if Adrian is really going to refuse to acknowledge him now. He wonders if this is the teacher. The blonde-haired man claims his memory is a mess and that he only vaguely remembers who the man is, which leaves the gray-haired teacher looking stunned and suspicious. A sudden announcement that the king has arrived interrupts the conversation, leaving the blonde-haired man wondering about the nature of the man's father. He assumes the king is his father. The father exceeds his expectations. He notes the lion's blood remains. The king stares coldly at his son and remarks that seeing as Adrian won't even greet his own father, It seems escaping death hasn't changed his terrible personality. The king mentions hearing that the prince's memory is not intact, causing a sudden panic among the guards who wonder why the physician didn't report this critical fact.
The prince rusts while being examined.
The physician informs the king that he cannot find any physical abnormality in the prince's body. The king looks skeptical as the doctor explains that the memory loss might be a temporary condition caused by psychological shock. The king repeats the words memory loss with a dark look, making the blonde-haired man wonder if his father has caught on to the deception. He calls the amnesia convenient. The king asks if this means everything the prince has done until now is simply erased, causing the blonde-haired man to recoil. The king lectures that while one can make wrong choices and draw condemnation, the key is realizing mistakes and never repeating them. He laments that his son has forgotten. The king growls that because the prince has forgotten his past, he hasn't taken a single step forward from his previous mistakes. As the gray-haired teacher tries to calm him down, the king shouts that the prince won't be able to move forward, leading the blonde-haired man to think his father is just hurling insults. The blonde-haired man feels like he stepped in something foul, realizing that instead of being treated like a prince, he isn't even being treated like a human being.
He wonders about the boy's crimes.
Someone suddenly calls out his name. A woman with a crown pulls the blonde-haired man into a tight embrace amidst a field of daisies, telling him she heard everything and promises his memory will return soon.
She dismisses his trivial past and laments that her poor son's beautiful face is so damaged, while he struggles to breathe and wonders where exactly the damage is.
She is happy he is awake. The queen warns him to never touch such dangerous things again, confessing that she doesn't want to imagine what would have happened if he hadn't woken up. The queen continues her emotional hug. While the queen expresses her relief, the blonde-haired man internally apologizes because her real son is already dead. He finds the situation very burdensome. The queen smiles warmly as she tells him she will visit again and urges him to rest well. He releases a heavy, tired sigh. The blonde-haired man reflects on how his friend asked him to watch over his descendants, yet he ended up being the one who unintentionally killed the boy and ended his life. Looking ahead with a focused gaze, he decides that since things have come to this, he will have to live well for both himself and the dead prince. The soul within the boy recalls reincarnating as a sword and spending an entire lifetime cleaning up after the messes of others. The blonde prince determines that he can simply rebuild his strength. His hand clenches firmly as a sharp, quick rustle sounds. He reflects on how many disciples he has raised in the past. Adrian states that he first needs to forge a mana heart, as his body reacts with a sudden, sharp jerk. He begins deep breathing as a long, deep huff sounds while blue energy manifests. A sudden, powerful burst of blue energy erupts around him. The blonde prince is left wondering what happened as he watches the mana scatter. He observes that the mana scattered because his body cannot accept it. He resolves to try the process one more time. A sharp, crackling spark echoes as the energy intensifies. He shouts for it to happen again while a heavy, labored gritting sounds. A sharp, sudden gasp escapes as the energy falters and shadows loom. The blonde prince collapses onto the floor. The prince pants with a heavy, desperate pant while questioning what kind of body this is. He wails with a sharp, loud wail that if only he still had his real body, he could have forced the mana into it to fix his lousy constitution. A quick, polite knock sounds as someone asks for a pardon for the intrusion. A brown-haired maid explains that the queen sent a medicinal tonic that will be good for his body despite the bitter taste. a sharp clinking sound following her arrival. She asks him to please consider the queen's heartfelt concern. The maid's nerves are clear as a sudden nervous gulp sounds while she waits for a reaction. She worries about him throwing the bowl again as she remembers him shouting that he won't drink it, a sharp, wet splash punctuating the memory. The prince realizes what is happening as a sharp, sudden gasp escapes. He notes that there is manna inside the cup. He snatched the cup with a sudden, quick clatter, shocking the maid. He downs the drink with a heavy, deep gulp. A long, stunned silence follows as the maid stares in pure disbelief. He tells her that she can go now after setting down the bowl with a quick, sharp set. He prepares for another attempt while the maid frantically agrees to leave, a quick, frantic scurry following as she runs away. He realizes that it thankfully works as a deep, vibrating hum fills the room. He stops the retreating maid with a sudden, loud creak of the door and calls to her, to which she hesitantly answers. Blonde Prince stares with intense, focused eyes. He points toward her and asks if she has any more of that medicine. Magic thrums with a deep, magical thrum in his hand. He lets out a low, dark chuckle and realizes that finally, things are progressing. The Blonde Prince shouts that he can finally make a mana heart. He thinks about having done this countless times already and notes he could do it with his eyes closed while a heavy, powerful thud sounds. A sharp, painful gasp sounds as a sudden realization hits him. He screams about the pain and his chest feeling like it will explode, but then he recalls that this is a known part of the process while a sharp, bright gleam shines. He realizes that making a mana heart was always supposed to hurt. He tells himself he mustn't lose consciousness as a sharp, strained grunt escapes. A sudden, loud blast occurs as he realizes that passing out now would cause the mana to flow backward. Blue light fades from the room with a sharp, quick zip. Adrian endures the torture with a heavy, painful groan. A sharp, crackling snap sounds as he tells himself he has to focus. He instructs himself to grab the rampaging mana without rushing, as a heavy, tight grip is taken on the energy. He follows the path of the blood from the heart to the right. He watches as the new heart finally begins to seep into his body. A soft, gentle drip echoes as he enters a state of calm focus. His eyes open slowly with a soft, slow blink. Exhausted but triumphant, he confirms that it is done while listening to a heavy, steady beat. With a heavy, powerful pulse and a sudden, strong leap, he realizes this is his very own mana heart, not something made for anyone else. The Blonde Prince cheers his success. He celebrates his new mana heart. A sudden realization startles the boy. System windows confirm the heart's creation. He stares at the glowing text. He notes the message's strange familiarity. Several new authorities begin to load. Special abilities unlock in limited capacity. He contemplates these mysterious new powers. Sunlight filters through the green trees. He notices his vision is clearer. He overhears voices from the hallway. Maids gossip about the prince's behavior. A sharp, pained groan sounds as a sudden headache strikes him. Depleted mana forces his powers off. He understands the limits of capacity. He mourns his lost sword-like sensitivity. He conserves mana for minor tasks. He resolves to expand his strength. A tiny bird watches the boy. Extreme hunger suddenly overtakes the prince. He adapts to his human form. The queen celebrates her son's recovery. She joyfully pinches his chubby cheeks. A mysterious visitor enters the room. Adrian fails to recognize the man. The queen introduces her stern brother. Adrian identifies his cold-hearted uncle. His uncle mocks his convenient amnesia. The prince demands a clear explanation. A sudden physical discomfort surprises him.
The uncle dismisses any royal expectations.
The boy looks completely bewildered now. A menacing glare from the man.
A pained, heavy groan sounds as he collapses under a powerful force. The uncle demands his total obedience.
He offers a future sword lesson.
Adrian finds the situation quite ridiculous. His uncle insults his physical appearance. Adrian proposes a high-stakes bet. He vows to earn his respect. Determination hardens the prince's gaze. He accepts the uncle's harsh terms. The scarred man accepts the challenge. They finalize their agreement for entertainment. The prince begins his grueling practice. He curses his current physical state. Mana surges through his every step. He uses energy to transform himself. The uncle watches in stunned shock. The scarred man swings a practice sword at Adrian with a sudden, sharp swing. Adrian looks down as a vibrant blue energy begins to hum around him. His uncle recoils in shock, questioning if the boy actually formed a mana heart. Adrian offers a confident, knowing smile in response to the surprise. He manifests a small flame of mana, asking if his uncle regrets their wager. The prince's eyes widen as he's questioned about his decision-making. His uncle demands to know how he even learned such an ancient technique. Adrian stares back, genuinely confused by the man's intense scrutiny. The scarred man dismisses mana hearts as crude tools for common mercenaries. Birds scatter above the castle as his lecture continues across the grounds. Adrian reflects on how much the world's standards have fallen over time. The uncle emphasizes that mana hearts are outdated and inferior. Adrian questions the claim, prompting the man to offer a demonstration. He tells the boy to watch carefully as blue energy begins to swirl. Adrian observes a distinct ring of mana forming in his uncle's eye. A glowing blue mana chain manifests around the scarred warrior's body. He explains that these chains are designed to shatter the aura of mana hearts. He claims the chain method is far more stable and advanced. A historical record mentions a family that fell long ago due to their old ways. Since that ruin, the use of mana hearts has completely vanished from history. Adrian studies a manual on mana chain theory, noting the drastic change in eras. The text describes how modern mages use circles while knights employ chains. A diagram illustrates the progression from single to quadruple mana chains. After seeing the pentachain realm, Adrian admits the theory isn't total nonsense. He taps his finger on the name Altlingen, finding it strangely familiar. A sudden, sharp realization strikes the boy as he stares at the page. He recalls a legendary sword from the past and the title of Sword Saint. A flashback reveals Ernest Altlingen challenging the world's greatest master. Adrian smiles, finally placing the origin of the familiar name. He leans back in his chair, feeling amused by the historical coincidence. He wonders about the eventual fate of the man who started it all. Later, Adrian stretches in the courtyard while guards observe his training. His uncle asks if he bothered to read the materials provided to him. The scarred man warns him about the foolishness of his path. Adrian shrugs with a dark grin, finding it difficult to agree with him. He claims he hasn't made a mistake, much to his uncle's frustration. A blue spark ignites in Adrian's palm as he speaks of true quality. He asks if his uncle understands the concept of a difference in class. The uncle looks away, clearly annoyed by the boy's seemingly arrogant talk. He compares Adrian to common dreamers who fail to become heroes. A memory shows a defeated warrior who couldn't surpass 2 mana rings. He challenges Adrian to prove his worth by defeating a double-chain knight. Success will grant him the guardianship his mother requested. A mocking smirk plays on the scarred man's lips as he awaits an answer.
Adrian laughs, questioning if having his uncle as a guardian is truly a benefit. The two face off in the training grounds with a sudden, sharp gust. The uncle steps forward, insulted by the questioning of his qualifications. He proudly declares his status as an earl and one of the Silver Lions. A massive, terrifying eruption of blue energy explodes around the commander. He reveals his full power, manifesting 4 glowing mana chains simultaneously. Earl Valhard identifies himself as a quad chaindate. The scarred man questions if his qualifications are now sufficient. A focused look at the boy's arm. Knights restrain the Earl while Titani orders him to stand down. The scarred warrior offers a mocking smirk. Adrian returns the smirk despite his facial injury. The blonde prince collapses in total physical exhaustion. He reaches out with a shaky hand. Adrian recovers while reeling from his near-death experience. Earl Valhard insults Adrian's grit and his chances of victory. The prince stumbles miserably down the castle hallway. A sudden, loud creak sounds as he opens the door. The court physician bows humbly before the young prince. The man explains he was sent to cast healing magic. Adrian screams as a glowing green orb of magic manifests. He kicks the physician out and rejects the magical help. Adrian worries the magic will ruin his physical progress. Titani watches the outburst with a look of concern. The door opens as a voice calls for a brother. The brown-haired prince strikes a smug, arrogant pose. Adrian's meal is interrupted by a sudden stop. He wonders who the annoying, smug newcomer is. Titani whispers that the visitor is the third prince. Jillian mocks Adrian's health and calls his recovery a shame. Adrian bluntly demands to know the reason for the visit. Gillian insults the boy for his past self-inflicted injuries. The smug prince mentions hearing some interesting rumors recently. He asks about the secret wager involving Earl Valhard. Jillian notes the upcoming duel against a double chain knight. A sinister, dark smirk forms on Gillian's face. He mockingly offers to be Adrian's sparring opponent instead. Adrian stares back at his brother in heavy silence. The boy questions the odd nature of his descendants. Titani praises Jillian's talent while Adrian dismisses him. A memory shows Gillian mastering rings at a young age. A maid struggles with a massive pile of incoming mail. She announces a sudden influx of letters for Adrian. Adrian questions the interest from his previously neglectful peers. He scans the contents with intense, narrowed eyes. The prince reviews the mysterious pile of messages. The letters reveal numerous formal requests for a duel. He realizes everyone wants a legal chance to fight him. A dark grin appears as he spots a perfect opportunity. He calls out to the startled, nervous maid. Adrian commands her to record every name for combat. A wooden practice sword lands with a sharp thud. Earl Valhard insists on teaching the boy basic swordplay. He warns against making excuses for any future failures. Adrian begrudgingly prepares to pick up the wooden weapon. A sudden, sharp flinch escapes the blonde boy. A sudden, sharp groan of muscle pain escapes Adrian as he doubles over. Earl Valhard raises a gloved hand, calling for a momentary stop. The scarred man demands to know if Adrian skipped the healing magic he was supposed to receive for his injuries. He notes that as a knight himself, the boy should understand the consequences of training while injured. The two stand in heavy silence across the wide stone training courtyard. The Earl offers a curt, dismissive nod of acknowledgement. He turns his back, stating that the healing wasn't what he intended to discuss today anyway. He commands Adrian to watch closely as he prepares a single demonstration. He identifies the weapon as the standard training sword Kingdom Knights use to build their foundations. A sharp flash sounds as the Earl's eyes ignite with a piercing blue glow. He moves with blurring speed, leaving vibrant trails of blue mana behind his blade. The warrior demonstrates a precise and powerful rotation with his training sword. A humming blue energy swirls around the hilt as he prepares his next strike. He delivers a crushing vertical blow that seems to shatter the air itself. A massive shockwave of dust and energy erupts across the stone grounds. Adrian watches the display of overwhelming power with a look of stunned disbelief. Adrian repeats the Earl's words with a skeptical look, questioning if that was truly just a foundational style. A sharp, annoyed tisk sounds from the scarred warrior. He explains that while the style is faithful to basics, it is actually superior to Adrian's current level of talent. Adrian bursts into a fit of boisterous laughter, noting how much time has changed things. A memory shows the legendary Dragon Slayer sword being used to slaughter a mad dragon. He finds it ridiculous that such a great swordsmanship is now treated like a worthless training toy. Valhard suggests that Adrian should beg the queen for a more competent master later, but Adrian bluntly refuses. The blonde prince looks back with a newfound, sharp focus in his eyes. The Earl looks away, momentarily taken aback by the boy's sudden change in intensity. A sharp creak sounds as Adrian's hand tightens its grip on the wooden sword. He begins a heavy, singular swing with every ounce of his current strength. Adrian pours himself into his practice swings, ignoring his physical exhaustion. He admits that his current physical failures are a natural result of his body's state. He reflects on how the current Dragon Slayer style lacks the true spirit of its origin. A vision reveals the true value of the Dragon Slayer to those who have forgotten mana hearts. A sharp clack sounds as the two wooden swords collide in a sparring match. The Earl stops Adrian's clumsy strike with effortless, measured precision. He pushes the boy's weapon aside with a sudden, forceful movement. He lectures that raw strength in the arms alone is not enough to power a sword. A sharp thwack sounds as he strikes Adrian across the waist with his wooden blade. Another thud sounds as he hits the boy's legs, causing him to stumble. He explains that true power requires strength to be distributed properly throughout the entire body. Adrian sighs as he struggles to maintain his footing while panting heavily. A sharp drip sounds as sweat falls from the boy's face to the stones. He reflects that his weak body is currently just clumsily imitating a fake version of the style. He vows to personally prove that the Dragon Slayer wasn't some worn-out rag to be discarded. A sudden splash sounds as his boot hits the ground during an early morning run. Days pass in a blur of constant running and grueling physical exercise under the Earl's gaze. Adrian continues his practice swings alone, his focus never wavering, despite the fatigue. A vibrant blue mana erupts from his body as he finally collapses in total exhaustion. System notifications announce that his constitution has successfully changed and his obesity trait has decreased. Adrian stands upright in the darkness, holding his sword with a much more stable posture. A notification confirms that his clumsy trait has disappeared and his exercise efficiency has greatly increased. A final alert indicates that his physical constitution has shifted further after steadily accumulating mana. Adrian pushes himself during practice as vibrant blue mana flares around his wooden blade. A system notification announces that his mana sensing disorder has been replaced by normal sensing as he performs a more natural swing. The blonde prince continues his grueling training, feeling himself grow stronger with every passing day. He completes a powerful rotation, satisfied that his movements are becoming increasingly perfect. The boy stands dazed and drenched in sweat while tightly clutching his wooden practice weapon. A massive, heavy impact shatters the ground into dark fragments as a quick boom sounds. Adrian stands in the pouring rain with a broken wooden sword as Earl Valhart and his guards look on. A dark red drop of blood falls into a murky puddle as a soft splash sounds. The boy looks up at the scarred man in confusion,
acknowledging him as his uncle.
Adrian's blue eyes are wide and bloodshot from the extreme physical strain of his training. A wooden training post stands split and smoldering with leftover energy as a sharp crackle sounds. The shattered remains of the practice target sit abandoned in the heavy downpour. The blonde prince is startled by a sudden, angry shout calling him a fool.
Earl Valhard berates the boy for training recklessly in the rain and warns him of the dangers of using real weapons.
Adrian looks down at his trembling hand, which is covered in dark bruises and thick calluses.
System alerts explain that he has emerged from a state of extreme concentration that his body still feels.
A notification confirms the creation of a super concentration trait as the boy examines his damaged palms. Adrian lets out a weary laugh while the rain continues to soak through his clothes. He reflects on the danger of his intense focus, likening the sensation to nearly being struck by lightning.
The exhausted prince collapses forward into his uncle's arms as a concerned knight rushes toward them.
Earl Valhard stares down at the unconscious boy with a somber and conflicted expression. Adrian remains completely still and silent as the scene fades into a dark transition. A new chapter begins as the title of the story is revealed over a dark backdrop. The blonde prince slowly opens his eyes as he begins to regain consciousness. He sits up in his large, ornate bed and wonders how long he was blocked out. Adrian rubs his head in frustration, lamenting the fragile physical limits of his current vessel. A series of memories flash by, revealing his past identities as a war hero, a swordmaster, and a legendary king. A vision shows the massive white form of a dragon being slain in a past life. The memories focus on a sharp, serrated detail of the fallen beast's anatomy. He recalls his ancient blade, Grufon, which served as both a weapon and a wise advisor. A final thought lingers on how he was always treated as a third party in those legendary tales. Adrian examines his hands again, noting that the skin is starting to heal from the previous day's abuse. He realizes he became too intoxicated by his own progress and vows to find a better balance for his body. The prince sits cross-legged on his bed, reflecting on the month that has passed since he formed his mana heart. He enters a deep meditative state as a notification confirms his success in accumulating a significant amount of mana. Swirling blue energy erupts around him as his body adapts to handle the increasing pressure. A system alert announces that his mana heart has successfully expanded to a new level. Adrian focuses the energy into the palm of his hand as his physical capacity increases once more. Vibrant blue mana surges through his entire frame, permanently altering his physical constitution. A sudden spark sounds as the boy's eyes snap open with a piercing, luminous glow. He stands triumphantly in the center of a massive blue vortex, declaring the transformation to be perfect. His attention turns toward a real steel sword resting on a nearby display stand. A sharp clink sounds as he firmly grips the hilt of the weapon for the first time. System alerts confirm he has reached the rank of sword learner and can now manifest a basic aura. Adrian's reflection is visible in the polished steel as the blade becomes wreathed in flickering blue flames. He tightens his hold on the sword, feeling confident that he has finally mastered the essential foundations. Later, Earl Valhard informs the prince that the news of his secret wager has become common knowledge throughout the kingdom. The scarred warrior expresses his irritation, noting that the rumors have brought unwanted attention to him as well. He advises the boy that he should prioritize finding a suitable opponent for his upcoming duel. Adrian forms a dark, confident smirk as he reveals he has already selected the perfect target for his challenge. Adrian suggests starting his training by sparring against opponents with single mana chains. The blonde prince calls out to Carls, asking if he has the items he requested. Carls confirms he organized everything and presents a list of noblemen who challenged the prince to duels. The knight expresses his concern, asking if the prince truly intends to spar with these specific individuals. He warns that most on the list harbor deep grudges and might attempt to cause serious injury during the fight. Adrian offers a confident smirk, acknowledging that he is fully aware of their intentions. The prince suggests that his uncle should act as the referee, receiving only a silent stare in response. He casually asks Earl Valhard to simply ensure that no one actually dies during the upcoming duels.
A brown-haired man stands before the palace, trembling as he looks at the massive structure.
He realizes he has finally reached the palace where the notoriously delinquent First Prince resides. A narration reveals the man is Taylor Talheim, the second son of a low-ranking noble family. A memory from years ago shows the prince boisterously laughing and pointing at others with disdain. Taylor recalls the prince mocking his family's clothes and manners, leaving his father and brother humiliated at a royal banquet. He laments how his family's honor was destroyed, leaving them as the laughingstock of the nobility. The young noble focuses his intense hatred on the name of the prince, Adrian Leonberger. Taylor humbly greets the prince while privately vowing to make him pay for the humiliation he caused. He announces himself as an apprentice knight of House Talheim as he prepares his weapon. Adrian scoffs at his opponent's weakness, while Taylor fumes at the prince's continued arrogance and lack of common sense. Earl Valhard interjects, telling the young man to calm his spirit before the match officially begins. Taylor's anger instantly vanishes, replaced by a look of pure admiration for the legendary Earl Valhard. He bows respectfully, declaring it a great honor to meet the Earl, who offers a brief, polite greeting. Adrian grumbles that people might mistake his uncle for the actual prince given how others react to him. The Earl retorts that the prince should have behaved better in the past, causing Adrian to complain about him bringing up old news. A sharp sound rings out as the Earl commands both combatants to take their starting positions. A heavy tension fills the air as the two swordsmen lock eyes, ready to begin the duel. Taylor ignites with a sudden, vibrant explosion of blue mana as he readies his stance. With a dark, determined smile, he tells the prince to be prepared as he releases his power. The young knight lunges forward with a shout, his speed leaving trails of energy in his wake. He delivers a crushing vertical strike from above, channeling his mana into a powerful blow. Adrian watches the incoming attack with boredom, noting that his opponent has too many wasted movements. A blinding flash erupts as Adrian effortlessly blocks the heavy strike with his own blade. Taylor is stunned to realize the prince has actually formed a mana heart, a feat he thought impossible. The blonde prince counters with a massive, sweeping swing that creates a dark vacuum in the air. A powerful impact forces Taylor back as he struggles to maintain his footing against the overwhelming strength. Taylor questions how a mere mana heart could block his chains, but Adrian dismisses the attack as a weak, single ring. Blue energy flares around the prince's sword as he notes that the opponent's mana only felt slightly tingly. The challenger stares in disbelief, unable to comprehend the level of power Adrian is manifesting. Nearby knights are shocked to hear the prince's sword emitting a distinct, high-pitched ringing sound. Earl Valhard watches with wide eyes, recognizing the legendary phenomenon known as the sword song. Taylor begins to panic as the prince tightens his grip, sensing a power that defies all logic. He shouts in denial and charges forward again, refusing to accept the reality of the prince's growth. Adrian remains calm, his focus unwavering as his opponent's reckless strike draws near. The two warriors clash again, causing a violent eruption of sparks and mana between their blades. Taylor screams in exertion as a massive shockwave of energy shatters the courtyard stones beneath them. A colossal explosion of white light consumes the training grounds as their powers reach a breaking point. A sharp sound echoes as a combatant's foot slams into the ground amidst the settling dust.
The dust clears to reveal both men still standing, though the intensity of the exchange has clearly taken its toll.
Idrian reflects on the inherent conflict between chain and heart mana as sweat drips from his brow. He clutches his glowing chest, noting that his mana feels like it might reverse its flow at any moment. Taylor seethes with unspoken rage, his face shadowed as he prepares for the next phase of the fight. The blonde prince holds his sword and tells his opponent he needs to cool his head. He closes his eyes in concentration. The boy sinks into blue water. The boy opens his eyes as a notification commands him to awaken. A narration describes the choice between a demonic or divine sword. He reaches toward a vision of a dragon described as a fragment of his soul. System notifications explain his mana heart has accepted a tremendous will and is being overlaid with color. A close-up of a dragon's eye appears as the dormant will of dragon slaying awakens. The prince stands before a colossal dragon silhouette as his dragon slayer's heart is activated. His eyes transform into red slits. He crouches with his sword as a red aura manifests, tempered for dragon slaying. A notification states the energy from the heart merged with the Dragon Slayer sword. A terrifying red dragon head appears in the prince's aura as his opponent watches in horror. Taylor trembles in fear while asking what in the world that is. Count Balorhard bellows for them to stop. He lunges forward with glowing eyes. A credits page displays the title of the story over a dark background. Count Balorhard repeats his desperate command to stop. The prince charges ahead as a system notification warns that the sword is dangerous. In a memory, the prince tells his uncle there is one thing he wants to ask before the duel, and the count asks what it is. The blonde boy requests that if it ever looks like he is going to kill his opponent, the scene returns to the present as the prince descends toward his terrified opponent. He finishes his request for his uncle to stop him just as the count blocks his strike. A violent blast of energy erupts. The heavy impact shatters the stone. Lightning crackles around the standing count. The boy collapses against the wall. A boot approaches the fallen prince. Other knights surround Count Balorhard with swords drawn, demanding to know what he thinks he is doing.
A speech bubble warns that he could be charged with attempting to harm a royal depending on how the situation is judged.
From the ground, the prince commands the knights to stand down because he was the one who asked the count to intervene. The blonde boy realizes he was indeed hit, but notes that he was the one who asked for it. He tells the knights that while he asked to be stopped, he never said to be knocked out. A loud shout rings out, calling for His Highness. The final spark of mana flickers. Swirling blue energy slowly dissipates. The prince clutches his glowing blue chest, thinking that his mana heart was really going to crack. He reflects that his uncle's strength is on a different level from some single-chain weakling, and that he took that hit head-on. A thought bubble expresses relief that there seem to be no serious after-effects. He triumphantly declares victory in the duel. Later, sitting on his bed, the prince is surprised to see his uncle smiling.
Count Balorhard asks what brings him there and just what he has done.
The count demands to know what that corrupt sword technique was, as he never taught the boy anything like that. The blonde prince explains that he only stayed true to the essence of the sword. His uncle is dismissive, remarking on the boy talking about the sword's essence when he has never seen real battle. A thought bubble defines the essence of the sword as killing intent.
Count Balorhard acknowledges that the boy's methods are crude and unsettling, but still represent one form of truth.
The blonde boy finds his uncle's response to be unexpected. He admits he thought the Count would start preaching about the path of the sword being a journey to perfection with a long sermon on top. Count Balerhard explains that he is a soldier who prioritizes winning over righteousness as he stands before his troops. The blonde prince gasps as he suddenly awakens. He contemplates the difficult path that lies ahead. Earl Valhard warns that excessive bloodlust will eventually blind the prince to the difference between friend and foe. Adrian retorts that the current situation was staged specifically to resolve that issue. The black-haired man vows to watch closely to see if the boy is ultimately consumed by his inner demons. Adrian addresses the exhausted Taylor Talheim as their long training session concludes. A simple training sword remains resting on the courtyard stone. The blonde boy commends his opponent for his hard work over the past 3 days. Taylor recalls the overwhelming terror of facing the prince's uncontrolled killing intent and red-eyed gaze. A single bubble asks if the outcome is frustrating. Adrian suggests Taylor would feel better if he had actually managed to land a single hit. The prince commands a maid to bring a specific item forward. A maid carries an ornate wooden chest as Taylor questions what is happening. Adrian presents the chest, acknowledging that he caused unforgivable pain to Taylor's family in the past. He instructs the stunned young man to deliver the money and letter to Baron Talheim as compensation. Adrian dismisses Taylor and tells him to be careful on his return journey. Taylor shouts his tearful gratitude from the distance as the prince reflects on the necessity of paying for one's misdeeds. In the palace gardens, malicious nobles gossiped about their desire to see the arrogant prince humiliated. A bystander asks another noble how the recent duels actually turned out. Several defeated challengers look inspired and sparkling, claiming they now fully understand and respect the prince's true intentions. Other observers are deeply confused and disturbed by the challenger's sudden change in attitude. A thought bubble suggests the royal family must have forcibly silenced the participants. A fist slams into wood as a shout aggressively rejects the idea of being silenced. Adrian bellows that the challengers are simply too embarrassed to admit they lost to him. Adrian criticizes the idle nobles and suggests they be productive, but Valhard immediately calls out his hypocrisy. The prince's intense, glowing glare causes the messenger to flinch in sheer terror. Adrian menacingly demands that the man ensures the true duel results are spread properly. He confidently assumes that these actions will finally cause the negative rumors to subside. The blonde prince is blindsided by a confusing and unexpected question. A nervous maid reports a new rumor that he is threatening people to lie about the duel results. A dark shadow falls over the prince as he processes his frustration. Adrian ignites with blue mana and decides to vent his irritation through more training. A swift, powerful arc of energy cuts through the training grounds. The boy's movements become a frantic blur of speed and blue light. A final, heavy strike causes a violent eruption of energy. Adrian stands exhausted, his blue mana heart pulsing visibly through his white shirt. He asks Carls how many opponents remain, and the blonde knight confirms only one is left. Carls observes that apprentice knights are no longer enough to satisfy the prince's growth. The knight explains that the final opponent is a skilled warrior trained in proper swordsmanship. A glowing crest appears as Carls adds that the opponent even joined a formal knight order for further training. A confident and curious smirk grows on the prince's face. A mysterious woman in silver armor approaches the heavily guarded palace gates. Guards confirm her identity by checking the Iron Lion crest etched into her shoulder plate. Narration describes the beautiful warrior as a thorny rose blooming on a cliffside. A sharp clack sounds as the knight's heavy metal boots come to a sudden halt. The palace guards are mesmerized by her striking beauty and surprised she came of her own will. The long-haired woman remains stoic, her profile illuminated by the afternoon sun. Her sharp, focused eye indicates she is ready for the upcoming challenge. The dark-haired woman with purple eyes prepares to face the prince in a highly anticipated duel. The official crest of the Iron Lion Knight Order glows brightly. Arwen Kirgian is introduced as a promising apprentice knight, confirmed for full membership. Idrian wonders why a prodigy would come to duel him. Carls mentions a past misunderstanding, but the prince admits he likely just picked a fight. Adrian asks a brown-haired maid to tell him exactly what happened. The maid looks away nervously, hesitating to speak. She reveals that in the past, he harassed Sir Arwen. Adrian grips his hair and screams in frustration at his past self's behavior. A memory begins as Arwen stands in a palace hall. A younger, arrogant Idrian approaches her and suggests she become his personal maid. A sharp slap sounds as Arwen forcefully rejects his reaching hand. She furiously reminds him that the Knight Order is not his personal property. Idrian reacts with rage, shouting that she is an ugly thing. Back in the present, Idrian reflects on the warped courtship of his past delinquent self. He looks at Arwen and admits there is no way he would actually call her ugly now. Arwen greets the prince and remarks that he hasn't changed at all. Adrian puts a hand behind his head and insists his entire core has been replaced. Arwen glares with purple eyes while Idrian accepts that her hostility is his karma. A messenger announces the arrival of Count Balerhard on the training grounds. The scarred count stops and looks at the prince's opponent. Arwen offers a formal knight's greeting to the count. The count warns her about the prince's sword, prompting Idrian to complain about his lack of neutrality. Count Balerhard closes his eyes to signal the start. He commands both of the combatants to take their positions. A wide shot shows the count raising his hand as the duel officially begins. Arwen lunges forward with incredible speed and focus. Adrian smirks as he watches his opponent's initial strike. The knight descends with a powerful, blue-tinted overhead strike. Adrian's eye glows blue as he acknowledges her decent movements. Their swords collide in a violent explosion of mana. Idrian spits blood as he notes his mana is trying to reverse its flow. Arwen maintains a fierce, steady gaze as their blades remain locked. A pained groan escapes the prince as he struggles against the pressure. Arwen unleashes a rapid, multi-directional barrage of blue energy slashes. Adrian grits his teeth, realizing he is being completely overwhelmed. The knight charges again, becoming a blur of motion. A notification confirms his Dragon Slayer's heart is activated as red aura erupts. Arwen is shocked as her strike is intercepted by the terrifying red mana. The combatants trade rapid blows across the stone courtyard. Arwen stares at the prince's blade, questioning what kind of sword it is. Adrian admits she is on a completely different level from his previous opponents. A system notification allows him to use the authority of insight in a limited capacity. A status screen reveals Arwen is a 19-year-old sword prodigy with peerless beauty. Adrian spits to the side and prepares to test his newly awakened power. Arwen ignites with intense blue mana, ready for the next exchange. A thought bubble explains that his insight confirms she is weaker or about equal to him. Fast movements and strikes kick up dust and sparks on the ground. Enveloped in a massive red aura, Idrian declares that the real fight starts now. The blonde boy is left gasping for air, sweat dripping from his face. Both fighters stand exhausted under a sunset sky as the duel continues. A training sword points toward the ground as the battle pauses. Count Balerhard declares that the duel is officially over for the day. The blonde boy grumbles, frustrated that he was interrupted right before finishing the fight. Arwen coolly remarks that she was feeling exactly the same way about the match. A competitive spark ignites between them as they agree to meet again at any time. A sudden, booming command to stop echoes across the wide, dusty training grounds. The Count insists that both combatants immediately go to receive medical treatment. A healer hurries over, using a sphere of glowing green mana to tend to the prince. Adrian looks away with an annoyed expression as the healer discovers even more bruises. A quiet, quick top sounds as the healer moves to provide aid to the stoic warrior. Arwen remains silent, her face showing the physical strain of the intense confrontation. The two rivals pass each other without a word as the evening light fades. Walking away under the sunset, the woman determinedly vows that she will not lose again. Time passes as the match remains unresolved even after 3 full days of fighting.
Two observing knights discuss their surprise that the duel has lasted this long.
The brown-haired knight admits that the first prince's skills are truly impressive. They watch from a distance, hoping to finally see a definitive outcome today. Before the next round begins, Adrian smirks and announces he has something to say. Arwen asks with suspicion if he is actually planning to offer her an apology now.
She stares him down with a fierce gaze, stating she has no intention of accepting one.
Thought bubbles suggest he is trying to reclaim his wounded pride through his own strength. The blonde boy shrugs casually, dismissing her assumptions about his true motives. He smiles mischievously, suggesting that such a fierce battle deserves a significant prize. Adrian proposes a wager where the loser must grant the winner any wish they desire. The woman remains silent, processing the weight and disrespect of his bold proposal. The surrounding knights shout in protest, claiming such a bet is unacceptable for royalty. Ignoring the noise, the prince looks directly at Arwen and asks for her opinion. Arwen cites her duty to the royal family as the reason she cannot agree to the bet. She suddenly ignites with intense blue mana, deciding she is entitled to claim the stakes. Enveloped in a swirling red aura, the prince commends her for her quick decision. With a shout that they cannot back out, the two warriors charge at each other. Their swords collide in a violent explosion of red and blue energy. Arwen executes a high-speed, blue-tinted slash that cuts through the air. A notification warns of a sudden impact as Adrian's red mana erupts with power. The knight is visibly shocked by the prince's incredible speed and growth since yesterday. A terrifying dragon aura towers over the boy as he reveals his hidden true skills. A frantic exchange of blows kicks up dust and sparks across the stone courtyard.
Arwen flips through the air with a quick, soft whoosh, narrowly dodging a heavy strike.
She groans in pain as the sheer force of his red energy pushes her back. The ground cracks under the intensity of their final, desperate exchange. The warrior struggles to catch her breath, completely overwhelmed by the prince's power. A sudden, heavy pulse of red mana signals the beginning of the final move. Adrian brings his blade down in a massive, crushing arc of energy. A sharp, ringing metal clank sounds as the knight's defense is finally shattered. A violent shockwave of red energy sweeps across the training grounds. The decisive blow lands with a blinding flash, signaling the end of the duel. Arwen is forced to her knees, her sword dropped, and her head bowed in defeat. The observing knights and Count Balarhart look on in stunned, absolute silence. The warrior gasps in disbelief, unable to process the fact that she has lost. Standing over her, Adrian confidently declares that he has won the wager. The prince calls out the woman's name as she remains kneeling before him in the dirt. The blonde prince gives a smug, knowing smirk. Arwen looks up in complete shock at his bold declaration. Carls reflects on his assignment being far easier than he originally feared. The prince asks about his new guard as Carls formally pledges his service. Adrian accepts the knight's service while Carls notes the boy lacks a violent temper. A memory shows a younger, rounder prince running frantically through the palace grounds. Carls watches the young boy with a silent, steady, and contemplative gaze. Rain pours down as the prince trains relentlessly with a wooden sword. Carls worries the rain is too heavy and wonders if he should intervene. He shouts a panicked warning to the prince about the potential danger. A violent burst of red and gold energy erupts from the training target. The sweating prince beams with pride after completing his successful strike. Carls stares in absolute awe at the prince's raw and hidden potential. He admits he always sensed the prince would achieve greatness someday. Back in the present, the prince stands over Arwen and repeats his demand. The surrounding knights react with shock, calling the prince's request completely shameless. Carls feels confused, questioning if he had previously judged the prince correctly. Arwen struggles to find words as she processes the weight of his demand. Her voice rises in anger as she asks if that is truly his desire. Adrian explains she is currently just an ordinary apprentice who lost to a delinquent. He continues with a confident grin, preparing to reveal his true motive. He clarifies that he wants the entire potential and future of Arwen Kiergain. The woman stares back at him with a wide-eyed, stunned, and emotional expression. Adrian states he requires a knight who will truly follow his lead. He specifies he doesn't want someone bound to him by mere royal orders. He declares his desire for a knight bound exclusively to him alone. He surveys the training grounds, noting his perspective on her current position. A status window highlights her talent as the prince praises her sword skills. The blonde prince addresses her formally as he prepares his final proposal. He officially commands Arwen Kiergain to become his personal knight. A flashback shows Arwen easily defeating several knights at once in training. An observer questions if that young child is truly the talented prodigy. She looks on stoically as others remark on her striking, standout beauty. A sharp metal clank sounds as Arwen effortlessly counters an attack. The warrior stands victoriously over her defeated opponent in the afternoon sun. An official voice confirms Arwen Kiergain as the winner of the bout. She executes a powerful, high-speed strike with clinical and lethal precision. Narration notes that despite her results, she was never viewed purely as a knight. Others call her a poster face, while she laments her limited role in society. She looks down in silence, reflecting on the weight of her past treatment. Arwen wonders if he truly values her potential and future as a warrior. The prince watches her with a calm, patient, and expectant gaze. Arwen looks up and asks him to promise her just one thing. She requests to be treated as a knight rather than as a woman. She pledges to follow his wishes if he agrees to her single condition. The two lock eyes in a tense, silent moment of mutual understanding. Adrian accepts the deal and gives his solemn promise to the warrior. A quick, soft step sounds as the prince approaches her. Arwen kneels before the prince in relegated text to accept her new role. She formally swears her absolute loyalty to Prince Adrian Leonberger. Carls offers his sword and his life to the prince's service. Count Balerhard observes the formal moment with a silent, stern expression. The blonde boy begins the formal knightly induction in his own name. He commands the kneeling warrior to be brave and courteous. Under the setting sun, he tells her to remain loyal to him. A woman executes a swift, powerful practice strike in the courtyard. Students discuss finding a way to void the vow made on a bet. Rumors spread about a secret relationship between the prince and his knight. The Rounder Prince screams in frustration about his terrible reputation. He complains about being considered the scum of the earth by everyone. Carls listens to his master's outburst in heavy silence. The knight tentatively calls out to the prince to get his attention. He asks for clarification regarding a comment made during the duels. A vision appears of the prince explaining he wants unforced loyalty. He notes that a royal order would eventually separate them regardless. With a smirk, he suggests Karls could swear a personal oath too. Karls asks if His Highness would actually accept such an oath. The prince gives a blunt and immediate refusal. He tells the knight that raising him would be no fun. Karls laughs off the rejection as they walk through the palace. The prince silently reflects that his rejection wasn't a joke. A royal document announces the prince's early release from his confinement. He is surprised to be released a month and a half early. He remembers the king's furious expression and intense, glowing gaze. A maid asks if he is happy about his confinement ending. He admits he has nowhere to go and no one to meet. She mentions finding an invitation addressed specifically to him. The prince looks curious about receiving a formal invitation. The card features an ornate design of a knightly helmet. He reads about a social club meant for special young lords. The maid explains that he was already a member of this society. She hesitates to describe what the young lords do for fun. Narration suggests that a lady finds these amusements quite incomprehensible. He remembers his past self carousing and drinking with several women. He dismisses the club as a place for drinking and chasing women. A specific detail on the letter causes him to pause. The note is from a friend named Bernard of House Eli. The name of the house clearly triggers a strong memory. Visions of blue manna armor illustrate a house that fell long ago. He decides he must attend the social club after all. He hopes the house hasn't fallen completely beyond any saving. 4 months have passed since he began his intense weight loss training. An excited tailor presents new clothes made to the prince's specifications. The outfit is black with a simple design and minimal decorations. The prince stands tall, looking remarkably slim and dignified in his new attire. He observes his physical transformation in a large mirror with satisfaction. He entrusts the tailor with creating his upcoming banquet outfit as well. He smirks, knowing his body will change even more by then. A royal carriage travels through the city toward the social club. Karls rides alongside the carriage, keeping a sharp eye on their surroundings. Prince Idrian yawns and complains about the exhausting duties of royalty. He feels stifled by the formal clothes, carriage, and constant escorts. The blonde prince's eyes narrow as he notices something nearby. He turns his attention to the maid sitting across from him. He asks about a visible injury on her neck. The maid nervously blames her own inadequacy and accepts his previous scolding. Adrian recalls his past self's cruel behavior and laments the body's dark history. He realizes he has known this maid for months without knowing her name. He formally asks the young woman for her name. She introduces herself as Adelia Byron, shocking the prince. He recognizes the legendary name despite her family's current lowly status. A vision depicts an age when humanity was oppressed by other races. Legend tells of saviors who rose to lead humanity to dominance. 5 heroes stand atop a cliff at the dawn of a new era. One of those legendary figures was the hero known as Gruvhan. A red-haired warrior contemplates the world that will follow the war. She stands defiant before a massive horde of giants. A golden glow ignites within the warrior's fierce eyes. A sudden, sharp sound accompanies a blinding flash of light. The red-haired knight leaps into battle against the monstrous giants. Narration describes the fall of the giant king, Edda, at her hands. She delivers a lethal blow that ends the history of plunder. This legendary hero was Agnes Byrne, the iron-blooded sword marquis. A weary but victorious smile crosses the marquis's blood-stained face. She views her enemies as mere scavengers seeking scraps. Her eyes burn with a terrifying and absolute resolve. She mocks the giants for their predictable and greedy nature. The warrior screams in fury at her massive, cowardly opponents. She curses the beasts as they are finally driven back. A sharp hum sounds as her holy blade glows with power. Back in the present, Adrian covers his ears at the memory of her foul language. He wonders how the glorious Bayern bloodline fell so far into servitude. Karls interrupts his thoughts to announce they have reached their destination. The armored knight checks on his master through the carriage door. Adrian steps out, noting the timely arrival of their destination. A firm, rhythmic clack sounds as his boots hit the stone floor. He points at Adelia and promises to have a private discussion later. The maid remains behind, completely bewildered by the prince's sudden interest. A man with long silver hair greets the prince with a cheerful smile. Bernard of House Eli formally welcomes Prince Adrian to the club. Adrian privately dismisses his old friend as a laid-back punk. His gaze sharpens as he observes his surroundings. A sinister smirk forms as the prince finds something interesting. He reassures Bernard that he is glad to be attending today. He pats the man's shoulder, anticipating a very entertaining visit. Bernard looks surprised by the prince's uncharacteristically bold demeanor. Boisterous laughter echoes through the halls of the social club. Noblemen inside share a crude joke about a lady's clothing. A man flirts aggressively with a woman while she feigns modesty. The lounge is filled with decadent nobles drinking and carousing. Bernard finds his friend's behavior unusually strange. He notes Adrian's surprisingly different mood. A heavy thump sounds as someone sits. A nobleman greets the prince cheerfully. He asks about the rumors regarding Arwen. Adrian listens in cold, heavy silence. The man wishes he had claimed her first. He makes a vulgar comment about her skin. Adrian asks if the man has a sister. Bernard reminds him of his own younger sister. The nobleman's confusion is cut short by a punch. Adrian delivers a brutal, bone-shattering strike. Glass shatters as the man hits the floor. The onlookers freeze in absolute terror. Adrian notes the man's line will survive. A sickening crunch sounds during a kick. The prince's eyes burn with lethal intensity. Narration declares the man's sister the new heir. Adrian prepares to deliver another heavy blow. A pained groan escapes the battered noble. The surrounding crowd watches in horrified shock. The prince grabs the man's collar roughly. The victim begs for an explanation. Adrian tells the man to listen carefully. He refuses to be treated like a delinquent. The noblemen remain completely and utterly baffled. He punctuates his point with a final strike. The man is sent flying across the lounge. Silence falls as the prince stands over them. The nobleman lies broken on the carpet. Bernard collapses to his knees in fear. Adrian reminds him he promised some fun. Bernard stares at the lunatic in dread. He is ordered to summon the knights. The man scrambles to obey the command. The prince stands alone amidst the carnage. A sharp clack sounds as he turns. He orders the ladies to leave immediately. A man watches the women flee. Quick, frantic footsteps echo through the hall. Adrian clarifies his order was for women. He threatens any man attempting to leave. A terrified gasp sounds from the crowd. Heavy, rhythmic steps sound on the floor. He notes their complete lack of respect. He recalls the man's mocking laughter. Adrian mentions the insult to his knight. He asks what crimes apply here. The doors creak open for the knights. Arwen confirms their actions border on treason. An urgent request for an order is directed toward His Highness. Prince Adrian stands tall before his knights, asking who they should force to kneel. A dark, knowing smirk spreads across the blonde prince's face. Terrified noblemen huddle together as they are stared down from a position of power. Adrian stands before his father in the grand, sunlit throne room of the palace. The king shouts in fury about the 14 noble heirs arrested for treason and insulting royalty. He demands to know if Adrian truly understands the magnitude of his actions. The king warns of the severe political backlash expected from the 14 powerful families involved. Adrian smirks dismissively at the mention of potential retaliation from the nobility. He explains that the families have already abandoned these heirs as shameful, lost causes. With a confident laugh, the prince suggests sending out a round of formal letters. Adrian tells the king he knows exactly who will handle the internal chaos of those houses. He specifies that the letters should be addressed to the siblings of the arrested delinquents. The king remains silent, staring at his son with a mixture of suspicion and deep thought. As he leaves the palace, a chibi Adrian's cheerful agreement contrasts with the king's remaining silence. Back in private, Adrian laughs warmly and tells a trembling young woman to relax. Adelia, the brown-haired maid, looks up with tear-filled eyes, terrified of potential punishment. Adrian observes her misery, realizing his past self must have tormented the poor girl relentlessly. A vision shows Adelia's house barely maintaining its noble status amidst the darkening shadows of history. Narration explains that the glorious history of House Bayern was systematically erased from memory. A legendary red-haired knight stands victorious, though her peerless combat techniques were eventually lost to time. Adrian's eyes shine with intense curiosity as he focuses his attention on the maid before him. A glowing system window reveals Adelia's incredible S-rank swordsmanship talent and a contradictory set of traits. The prince's eyes widen in genuine shock as he reads the bizarre combination of abilities. He is baffled by the insane lineup of personality traits listed in her status window. Visions depict her as a bloodthirsty butcher and battle maniac, yet simultaneously timid and a devoted caretaker. Adrian scratches his head, frustrated that such monstrous talent has no internal mechanism for control. He questions if it is truly wise to unleash such a chaotic and powerful force upon the world. He stands in heavy silence, contemplating the shivering young woman across the expansive, moonlit room. Despite the risks, the prince decides that he must at least attempt to guide her. He reminds himself that her S-rank talent is far too valuable to simply ignore. A plan begins to form as he identifies a specific trait he can use to his advantage. He focuses on her slave mentality trait, represented by a massive, looming hand over her silhouette. Adrian looks down at Adelia and formally demands that she swear her total loyalty to him. The brown-haired maid looks up in complete bewilderment at his sudden and strange request. He clarifies his command, ordering her to become his knight and swear the oath immediately. Adelia collapses to her knees, protesting that such a prestigious role is far beyond someone like her. Adrian reminds her of her family's desperate situation, hitting a nerve as she listens intently. He offers her a deal. In exchange for his help, she must serve him as her absolute master. He promises to be the one to hold the reins of the madness she cannot control herself. Adelia asks if he will truly take responsibility for her family's house, and he firmly confirms. The maid's face lights up with joy as he promises she can visit the capital whenever she wishes. Bowing her head deeply, Adelia, first daughter of House Bayern, swears her eternal loyalty to Prince Adrian. Adrian watches her with a serious, calculating expression as she pledges her life to his service. He gently places his hand on her head, accepting her oath with a simple acknowledgement. The prince commands her to obey his orders unconditionally from this moment forward. Adelia blushes with happiness and relief as her new master continues to pet her hair. Adrian looks away with a slight bead of sweat, his initial confidence replaced by a hint of doubt. A thought bubble reveals his inner anxiety, questioning if he actually made the right choice. Narration notes that rumors of the first prince returning to his delinquent ways are already spreading. Narrative boxes describe rumors of the prince's underhanded methods and the recent imprisonment of noble heirs. Gossip spreads about him building a harem by appointing an inexperienced maid as his personal knight. Adrian rests his chin on his hands, wondering why everyone is suddenly obsessed with his life. He complains to Arwen about the endless opinions surrounding his choice of a single knight. The king angrily scolds his son for causing messes and allegedly chasing after women. A scarred nobleman insults Adrian, calling him pathetic for supposedly abandoning an important bet. A man in royal attire mocks his brother's decision to name a maid as a knight. Adrian sighs in exhaustion as he realizes how quickly the palace rumors have traveled. A sudden, loud shout of pure frustration echoes through the room as he loses his temper. The queen expresses disappointment, believing her son is returning to his former delinquent ways. She suggests that his regression might actually be for the best in the long run. Adrian is left sweating and confused when his mother claims marriage will fix his behavior. The queen passionately vows to personally select the perfect bride for him this time. Silence falls over the room as Adrian watches his mother make a dramatic exit. Adelia looks on with wide eyes, curious if she will truly gain the power of mana. Adrian confirms that she is about to awaken a very rare and special kind of mana. He focuses his concentration as swirling blue energy gathers around his fingertips. Adelia reacts with shock as a warm, golden radiance begins to surge into her body. A glowing spiritual figure in armor manifests behind her to guide the mana awakening. The powerful energy flows through her limbs as the ancient inheritance takes hold. A resonant, thunderous pulse sounds as the spirit's energy merges with Adelia's soul. A brilliant orb of golden power forms between her hands, marking her transformation. A system notification confirms that Adelia has successfully sensed mana for the first time. Adrian watches intently, relieved that the mana engraving process has been completed successfully. Her eyes shine with a piercing golden glow as her new power fully awakens. Adelia stares at her hands in disbelief, marveling at the strange feeling of mana. Adrian explains how to independently refine her new mana heart during her free time. The prince suddenly collapses from exhaustion, prompting a panicked cry from his new knight. He reflects on the massive physical toll required to help her form a mana heart. Adrian claims he is merely tired, while Adelia questions why he would help someone so lowly. He curtly tells her it is enough and dismisses her from the room. He asks why she is staring as she remains frozen in place with a shocked expression. Adelia bows fervently, loudly swearing her eternal service to him with all her heart. Adrian gives a cocky smirk, reminding her to never forget who her master is. She joyfully accepts his command with a bright smile and a blushing face. The prince walks away with a satisfied air, leaving the emotional maid behind. A quiet inner thought reveals a secret concern that she might eventually forget her vow. Adelia stands in the shadows with an intense, unsettling gaze as the prince remains wary. Arwen approaches to deliver a report regarding the status of Bernard of House Eli. She reveals that Bernard is being detained by palace guards as a witness for an upcoming trial. Adrian worries about attending the trial, but Arwen clarifies that royals are exempt from court. A relieved Chibi Adrian celebrates the news that he can avoid the legal drama. He notes the situation has grown surprisingly large while Adelia quietly cleans a nearby vase. Adrian catches her off guard by suddenly asking how she has been feeling lately. He checks if her mana heart has stabilized, and she confirms that it is steady. The prince decides that she will begin training alongside him starting from this very day. He gives a thumbs up and tells her to meet him in the training yard. Adrian tells her to put down the cleaning rack, reminding her that she is now a knight. He begins warming up under the bright sun, stretching his arms in the palace courtyard. He stops his workout to ask what she is doing as she lingers nearby. Adrian tells the scarred nobleman he is warming up, but the man clarifies he isn't speaking to him. The black-haired man points towards the running Adelia as his true focus. Adrian explains he is making the girl a knight, asking if the news has traveled. The scarred man indignantly questions Adrian's respect for the prestige of knighthood. Adrian asks why the meddling nobleman is so obsessed with his reckless choices. Adrian questions his visitor's persistence as Adelia approaches with a tired greeting. Adelia collapses from exhaustion after completing her 10 laps of training. Adrian ignores the scarred man's cold stare as Adelia recovers. Adelia apologizes for her state, but Adrian dismisses it and offers her a training sword. Adrian smirks and promises to teach her basic stances for the day. Adrian demonstrates a swift strike and instructs her on proper posture. Adelia holds the wooden sword with wide, uncertain eyes as Adrian commands her to try. Adelia nervously takes a stance and asks if her posture is correct. Adelia's eye glows with hidden power. The young knight executes a shockingly powerful and precise sword swing. A heavy thud sounds as her foot strikes. The scarred nobleman watches in stunned silence, sweating from the sheer pressure. Adrian is visibly shaken, realizing she perfectly copied his move on her first attempt. Adelia asks if her form was correct while Adrian remains frozen in disbelief. Adrian worries that even a moment of distraction will allow her to surpass him. He fears that her growth will lead to her turning against him in the future. Adrian's gaze turns cold and analytical. The scarred man smiles as he recognizes her monstrous potential. Adrian demands to know what the nobleman is planning with his sudden interest. Adrian looks intensely at the man. The scarred man dismissively asks what a prince could possibly offer a talent like her. He mocks Adrian's lack of experience compared to the girl's raw power. Blue energy surges around the man as he warns Adrian that she is uncontrollable. Adrian reflects that his former self would have fled from such an intimidating presence. Adrian asserts that he is different, resolving to maintain control over his new knight. A massive spectral skull manifests as Adrian claims he is her only master. Adrian declares his true, formidable identity. Images of ancient, powerful beings appear. A dark, enchanted blade glows ominously. A window confirms that Grufon manifests the wielder's soul. Adrian's face glows with red energy. The scarred nobleman stares in horror, enveloped in red flames. Adrian claims ownership of the situation. Adrian's eyes burn red as he declares that Adelia belongs to him alone. He asserts his absolute possession. Adrian warns the man to never look at or desire what is his. He expresses his deep hatred for anyone who tries to take his property. The man stands in heavy shadow. Adrian's glowing red eye pulses. Adrian's consciousness drifts into a cold, dark void where life feels distant. Floating in a deep blue abyss, he feels only oppressive cold filling his senses. Cracks begin to form across his face. He drifts towards a massive, radiant sword. Countless demonic hands reach out to devour his weak body for the sword Grufon. A hand reaches for his eye. Adrian looks away from a pile of demonic hands, declaring he has reached his limit. Swirling blue energy flows around demonic hands reaching out from the shadows. Adrian looks down with a serious expression as blue energy begins to surround him. A streak of blue light cuts across a dark background. Adrian prepares to continue his training in the Bright Palace training yard. Adrian remarks that even one ordinary knight can save the lives of 10 soldiers. Count Balarhard shouts that one outstanding knight can save the lives of 100 soldiers. He notes that Adelia might, perhaps, become that kind of outstanding knight. Adrian watches her with a thoughtful expression, wondering if what he sees is conviction. Narration notes the great cause of the Northern Frontier commander amidst a snowy scene. The commander of the Northern Frontier stands firmly as snow falls around him. Adrian dismissively tells the Count that his opinion on the matter does not concern him. The Count shouts that countless people could be saved, but Adrian bluntly addresses him by name. Adelia declares her body and heart belong to the prince, refusing to follow the Count's words. Count Balerhard is left sweating and speechless by her absolute refusal and unwavering loyalty. Adrian reflects that forcing out a piece of his soul was worth it to ensure her submission. He smirks at his uncle, noting that the Count heard her refusal directly from her. Adrian mocks his uncle, claiming the man has nothing left to teach except weight loss tips. He warns the Count to stop meddling in his affairs if he wishes to continue visiting. Count Balerhard reluctantly agrees while gritting his teeth and sweating in visible irritation. Narration notes the Count's decision to keep a close eye on Adelia's progress. Adrian finds amusement in watching his normally arrogant uncle feel so flustered and defeated. Adelia's wooden sword suddenly ignites with golden mana, prompting a curious reaction from her. Count Balerhard stares in horror, recognizing the powerful and rare manifestation before his eyes. Adrian is visibly shaken, questioning if she has already managed to manifest a sword song. A sudden, quick clapping sounds as Adrian enthusiastically praises her for a job well done. A thought bubble reveals his inner anxiety that she might actually surpass him one day. Adelia blushes with a bright, happy smile after receiving praise from her master. The Count demands to know if Adrian also taught her how to form a mana heart. Adrian nonchalantly asks his uncle if he has a problem with his teaching methods. The Count shouts that one person learning such a low trick was already more than enough. Adrian's gaze turns cold and analytical as he stares at his angry uncle. He bluntly orders the Count to get out of his presence. The Count yells that Adrian has completely ruined a level of potential he cannot even imagine. Adrian commands Carls to show the Count out, while the armored knight looks on with concern. The Count turns away in a huff, declaring he will walk out on his own. Adelia worriedly asks the prince if what she has learned is truly just a cheap trick. Adrian firmly reassures her that it is not a cheap trick at all. She looks confused, asking why the Count would say such negative things about her training. The Count reflects that the people of this current era have forgotten what a real mana heart is. Adrian thinks to himself that they wouldn't have thrown it away if they hadn't forgotten its value. He tells Adelia she will soon witness the true, overwhelming power of her new mana heart. A sudden, resonant boom sounds as a powerful surge of energy strikes the training ground. Adrian watches the settling dust with a calm, stoic expression. He challenges the Count, noting his return despite acting like he would never come back. The Count offers to acknowledge Adrian if the prince can push him back even half a step. Adrian grips his wooden sword and asks what the stakes for this challenge will be. He smirks as he prepares to strike, asking if the prize is granting a wish. The Count promises to pass down family secret techniques if he is defeated in this duel. Adrian gathers blue mana, stating that secret techniques aren't what he is actually after. Adrian lunges forward with his wooden sword, shouting for the fight to begin. Count Balerhard smirks as he dodges, noting the prince is targeting his neck immediately. The Count observes that Adrian's swordplay is as vicious as ever while the boy stays low. Adrian executes a wide, sweeping strike that misses as the Count remains focused. Adrian's eyes glow with a piercing blue intensity as he prepares his next move. The two exchange a rapid flurry of strikes, their wooden weapons blurring in the air. Their swords meet with a sharp, resonant clatter as they test each other's strength. Enveloped in blue energy, the Count mockingly asks if this is the extent of Adrian's power. Adrian grits his teeth against the pressure of his uncle's superior force. Adrian is forced back across the dirt, leaving a trail as he stabilizes his stance. Count Balerhard looks on with disappointment, asking if his nephew has already surrendered.
Catching his breath, Adrian internally acknowledges that his uncle is undeniably formidable.
He reflects that the Count is merely waiting for him to use mana to deliver a humiliating defeat. Adrian realizes that against a mana heart of this level, he is destined to lose as planned. The prince suddenly smirks and asks the Count if the current situation seems strange to him. The scarred man looks back with a single, confused question mark appearing above him. Narration notes that legendary knights with mana hearts once achieved feats beyond normal belief. Adrian reflects on a useful new technique that changed how the world perceives mana. He notes the common belief that mana chains are a far superior method of wielding power. Count Balerhard asks for clarification, and Adrian bluntly states that he disagrees with common wisdom. Adrian asserts that the wielder, not the mana heart, was the true source of weakness. Looking through the shadow of his blade, Adrian calls out to his uncle. A dark void asks if he has ever heard of the term war epics. The Count dismissively states they are here to fight, not to discuss poetry. Adrian lets out a small laugh, having fully expected his uncle to react that way. Adrian reminds him of his insults toward mana hearts, but the Count tells him to stop talking. The boy's eyes pulse with blue light as he firmly refuses to stay silent. He declares that the path a knight walks becomes his achievement and his pride. His internal strength begins to manifest as he centers his focus. A golden window appears as the Count wonders what is happening with the boy's strange aura. Flashes of past battles illustrate how engraved achievements can transform into a war epic. A system notification confirms that a new war epic now dwells within the knight's sword. The window identifies the new common rank creation as the Song of Sparring. Adrian reflects on the modest, ordinary record of the past 6 months he has spent training. A final notification confirms that the Song of Sparring has been officially activated. Clad in radiant blue energy, Adrian declares that this is the true potential he seeks. Narration emphasizes the emergence of the mana heart's genuine hidden power. Adrian stands ready for the final clash as his new ability fully takes hold of the field. Count Balerhard maintains that a mana heart can never overcome the strength of a mana chain. Adrian disappears into a high-speed blur as he launches a devastating counterattack. The training yard is filled with a sudden, violent clash of energy and wood. A heavy, resonant thud sounds as their wooden swords lock together with immense force. Blue lightning surges as narration explains that circulating mana in rings often leads to backlash. Adrian winces in pain as the volatile mana begins to strain his physical body. The Count smirks, feeling confident in his victory as the struggle continues. He admits that Adrian is exceptionally good at using brute force to endure the pressure. Adrian returns the smirk, knowing there is more to his strategy than simple endurance. He reflects on the hundreds of spars he endured to perfectly manifest this specific song. Memories of taking mana hits head-on flash by, showing the cost of honing his power. Adrian stands bathed in light, declaring he has withstood 1,000 waves to reach this moment. Adrian is enveloped in surging blue mana, identifying this manifestation as the Song of Sparring. Facing his nephew, Count Balerhard observes that the fight is finally starting to look manageable. A sudden, sharp tack sounds as the two duelists initiate a high-speed exchange in the training yard. Their wooden swords lock with a resonant boom as the scarred Count stares down with intense focus. The training ground echoes with rapid quang sounds as the boy and the man trade a flurry of blows.
Their weapons collide again with a sharp clatter as the speed of their movements blurs the air.
Adrian grits his teeth, looking determined while holding his own against his uncle's superior strength. The black-haired count is visibly surprised, wondering how the boy is managing to hold out for so long.
A wooden sword is suddenly charged with a teal electric glow, cutting through the air with a sharp hiss.
The count swings with massive force, unleashing a powerful energy wave that rocks the training yard.
Adrian is forced to dodge as a secondary shockwave tears through the dirt behind him. Looking confused by the boy's strange aura, the Count is told by Adrian that he has already explained the situation. Enveloped in glowing green mana, the Count declares that not all mana hearts are equal and mocks the boy's arrogance. The man's boot digs into the stone floor with a sharp scrape as he prepares to launch a finishing blow. He delivers a devastating downward strike, his weapon trailing a massive arc of blue and white energy. The training ground erupts in a violent explosion, and Adrian lets out a pained gasp as he is overwhelmed. The Count stands firmly amidst the settling dust, bluntly ordering the boy to stop playing games. Looking down at the struggling prince, the man admits that lasting this long against him was a commendable feat. Adrian remains slumped on the ground, wounded, and reflecting that a common rank war epic is simply insufficient. He begins to struggle back to his feet, starting a story about the knights from 400 years ago. Adrian asserts that the ancient knights made a grave mistake that fundamentally changed the world. A vision of a legendary knight standing atop a mountain of slain orcs illustrates the absolute power of the past. Narration explains that in the beginning, all techniques and sword arts were passed down in their entirety.
An armored warrior stands amidst cracks in the earth, having mastered the proper way to forge a heart and create war epics.
A fallen knight is shown upside down, signifying how time eventually eroded those brilliant feats.
Giant kings and massive dragons loom over a lone figure, representing the legendary foes the ancients once conquered.
A cartoonish dead dragon on a tapestry shows how those terrifying realities were eventually reduced to mere fairy tales. A system notification notes that while new war epics were born, they were far inferior to the originals. These new feats were built only on victories against fellow humans, lacking the scale of the ancient legends. A lone knight on a cliff is dwarfed by a massive mana tide that the modern world's lower ranks cannot withstand. Adrian looks at his uncle, claiming that techniques like mana chains will never reach the level of true transcendence. Looking across the yard, the Count asks if the prince has been drinking, unable to understand his strange ramblings. Vale Balarhard stares back with a grim, serious expression as he listens to his nephew's defiance. Enveloped in a sinister red aura, Adrian calls the Count a foolish knight and warns him about what has been lost. A terrifying red eye glows within a mass of dark, swirling shadows as the boy's energy shifts violently. A massive, demonic silhouette of a dragon rises behind Adrian as he threatens to show the Count the truth. The shadow looms over the field, radiating a dark and oppressive power that dwarfs the previous blue mana. Adrian's internal voice describes rending dragon scales that no sacred blade could ever hope to pierce. His face is partially obscured by the dark red energy as he describes the act of drinking blazing dragon blood. A golden system window appears as the prince declares he is now singing the Song of Dragon Slaying. A sharp chime sounds as a warning notification states the boy's current ability cannot handle a song of this rank.
Rapid system alerts announce that significant portions of the powerful song must be omitted for his safety.
Adrian stands centered in a red void, being told that only a single line of a half-verse will be activated. With glowing red eyes, Adrian lunges forward with a speed that catches his uncle completely off guard.
Their swords meet with a thunderous impact, the red and blue energies clashing violently in a storm of light. A sudden, sharp "ah" sounds twice as a massive explosion of red power surges outward from their weapons. Count Balarhart stares in pure shock as his wooden sword begins to crack under the impossible pressure. The Count realizes with horror that the overwhelming force of the song is threatening to devour him entirely. A final, massive explosion of energy and dust consumes the entire training ground. Adrian is sent tumbling across the ground with a series of loud thuds as a voice calls for the prince. A thick cloud of dust settles. Adrian sits defeated in the dirt. Adrian asks his uncle why he broke his promise by using 4 rings.
He notes that despite the Count's power, the man's blade was still damaged.
The exhausted prince remains on the ground. The Count asserts the absolute superiority of chain mana over heart mana.
Narration describes this hierarchy as an undeniable truth.
Adrian addresses Count Vale Balarhard by name. The scarred man coldly declares that his nephew has lost. A dark dragon silhouette looms ominously. Dark, swirling energy consumes a broken weapon. A golden sword glints through shadows. Adrian gasps for air in pain. Adrian clutches his chest while recovering in bed. Violent coughing sounds echo through the silent room. His hand trembles while gripping the blankets. Adrian curses the heavy price of utilizing a war epic. Narration details the physical toll of forcing out such power. He reflects on the mythic scale of the Song of Dragon Slaying.
Adrian sits up, deciding that the result was worth the physical damage.
He reflects on the pride earned through 100 victories. Adrian resolves to stand firm against even greater upcoming challenges.
He wonders if his performance was enough for his future match.
The brown-haired maid is overjoyed that the prince is finally awake. She explains that his collapse caused a massive uproar and infuriated the queen.
Adrian asks for Count Balarhard's specific instructions.
She reveals the Count wanted to be notified the moment he woke up.
Adrian orders her to keep his awakening secret so he can rest.
A sharp pain suddenly strikes his chest. Narration warns of the horrific price of failing to recover from an epic. It describes a state where reality blurs, potentially leading to madness.
Adrian shudders at the terrifying prospect of being lost in memories.
An image illustrates the legend of the swordswoman, Agnes Byrne. Adrian tells the girl that as a descendant, she should inherit those legacies. She is stunned by the realization of her ancestors' immense power. Adrian explains she must grow significantly to be worthy of those songs. He asks her what purpose she wants her sword to serve.
The girl looks down with visible uncertainty. She questions whether she truly has the potential to become a knight.
She becomes extremely flustered and fails to articulate an answer. Adrian tells her to give him an answer once she has decided. He is surprised by a sudden shift in her energy. She vows to live her whole life as his sword.
Adrian stares at her with a stunned expression.
A loud horn blast sounds across a historical field. Ancient armies engage in a grand, legendary battle. Adrian is taken aback by the intensity of her declaration. Adelia Byrne offers up her own newly awakened song of subjugation.
Adrian is shocked by the sudden manifestation of her power.
He questions if this is Adelia's own war epic. A hand reaches out as a brilliant golden light begins to manifest. A massive golden mana tree erupts within the room, and a system notification announces the creation of a brand new war epic. Watching the golden aura, Adrian is shocked to see a notification for the common rank Song of Dominion as he lets out a startled curse. Narration describes the new power not as a battle skill, but as a soul-binding vow of submission that shackles two people together. This extraordinary manifestation occurs despite the girl possessing a slave mentality trait. Adrian ponders the irony of a legendary swordmaster's descendant weaving the song of subjugation as the blushing maid looks on. The golden mana shards shatter around him as the prince realizes he has just gained a very unexpected form of assistance. Smirking with a clenched fist, Adrian realizes that since he is the target of the song, the benefits of the bond belong to him. He watches the brown-haired girl smile, knowing that her personal growth as a warrior will now directly enhance his own strength. Adrian offers a quick word of thanks to Adelia, who becomes visibly flustered and frantic while cleaning up the table. She gazes at him with deep admiration, softly addressing him as her prince. Sunlight pours through the large windows of the lavishly decorated royal chamber where the two are seated. Adrian remains curious about the exact nature and form the benefit of their new bond will take. The scene shifts to the towering spires and green-roofed towers of the grand white royal palace. Sitting in a grand chair, Adrian looks thoroughly exhausted and moody while dressed in his formal black attire. Behind him, a blonde knight in silver armor and Adelia stand silently as his loyal attendants. Facing a woman in a purple gown, a chibi-style Adrian awkwardly admits that he is doing fine after the recent events. Adrian reflects that dealing with those who hate him is simple, but facing the guilt-ridden woman who truly cared for the original owner of his body is difficult. He finds navigating these sentimental relationships with the people of his past to be an incredibly awkward burden. The brown-haired queen urges him to let go of any bitterness toward his uncle, believing the count never truly intended to cause him harm. When the prince insists he holds no resentment, she cries out in disbelief, citing the rough handling and nagging he was forced to endure. Adrian secretly recalls his duel with Count Balarhart, knowing he already struck a devastating blow against the man's pride and life's work. He understands that for a man who lives by his sword, having his core truths denied by a boy is an unbearable weight. He knows he successfully planted a psychological heart demon within his uncle during their violent exchange on the training field. Adrian figures the man will either use the trauma to leap to new heights or be destroyed by it, but he finds the outcome is no concern of his. The queen explains the count is simply a clumsy warrior who has spent his life closer to swords than people, but he has begun to respect Adrian. She reveals a vision of the count persuading the crowned king in person to finally grant the prince his freedom. Adrian is caught completely off guard by the news that his period of confinement has officially come to an end. She mentions he immediately caused a scene upon his release, recalling a flashback of him loudly ordering the arrest of several people. The queen assumes that this specific incident is the reason why his uncle recently seemed so displeased with him. The prince rests his chin on his hands, wondering why a man like the count would go to such lengths for his sake. An elderly, white-bearded scholar named Niccolo Marchiadel enters the room and formally introduces himself to the prince. Reacting with immediate hostility and a disgusted expression, Adrian flatly refuses to cooperate with the new arrival. From the background, the blonde knight and Adelia watch the tense meeting with visible concern for the prince's behavior. Adrian collapses on the floor in a fit, protesting the need for education, while the old man compares the unlearned to simple beasts. When Adrian angrily asks if he's being called a beast, the scholar laughs and says he hasn't learned enough to even be called that yet. Infuriated by the old man's wit, the prince screams at him to stop twisting his words around. Sitting stubbornly on the carpet, Adrian claims he already possesses all the knowledge he could possibly need for his future. Niccolo smiles calmly and suggests they reach a compromise to settle their dispute once and for all. He proposes that if the prince can prove his intellect during their discussions, the scholar will agree to stop coming for lessons. Thinking he has an easy victory and a chance to escape his studies, Adrian flashes a confident and predatory smirk. A sharp, loud thud sounds as a heavy book is slammed onto the desk to begin their session. Adrian argues passionately that a ruler must always be wary of those around him, as people will exploit any sign of slack. The scholar slides a specific text across the table, noting that the content of the book should be of great interest to the prince. Adrian begins to read a passage describing the relationship between a ruler and their subjects as a cold transaction. He nods in agreement with the text, finding logic in the idea that every bond should be based on a system of give and take. Their deep intellectual debate continues through several topics as the sun begins to set outside the palace. The scholar gathers his stack of books together with several rhythmic tack sounds against the wooden table. Niccolo suggests they finish the rest of the discussion tomorrow, and a surprisingly cheerful Adrian eagerly agrees to wait for him. The prince lets out a joyous and hearty laugh, clearly having found a kindred spirit in the old teacher. Adrian finds the scholar's teaching session surprisingly ordinary and mundane. He flashes a knowing, satisfied smirk. Adrian reflects on the cleverness of the departing old man. Niccolo exits the palace, his arms full of books. Adrian sighs while lying upside down on his bed. He loudly complains about his absolute boredom to Carls. He rolls around, lamenting his lack of physical recovery. A sudden knock brings news of a high-profile visitor. Adelia confirms the arrival as Adrian orders him admitted. The prince anticipates the meeting with a confident posture. He watches the door with a focused, observant gaze. Count Ballerhart enters, looking weathered and deeply troubled internally. The scarred warrior remains silent for a heavy moment. A blunt, heavy apology leaves the prince completely speechless. The count admits his shame over breaking his own word. Adrian notes the true cost of his own previous exertion. He recalls the social fallout caused by his earlier actions. The count invites the prince to name his price. Adrian scoffs at his uncle's morbid and useless offers. He analyzes the mental barrier holding the warrior back. Adrian declares he will be merciful with his request. He prepares to deliver his specific, singular wish. He surprises the count by requesting a simple trip. The warrior confirms that Adrian's period of confinement is over. Adrian specifies his desire to travel beyond the capital's borders. The count stares back with a grim, wordless expression. They agree to schedule the trip around the upcoming banquet. The meeting ends with a promise to finalize the details. The count departs, leaving a heavy silence in the chamber. Carls admits his surprise at the prince's unexpected leniency. The knight explains he anticipated a much harsher punishment. Adrian begins to articulate his reasons for showing restraint. He admits to feeling a surprising amount of pity. Carls laughs, noting how much the prince has relaxed. Adelia interrupts the conversation with a sudden, excited call. She presents a sealed letter with a joyful expression. A firm grip holds the official, wax-sealed correspondence. Magical energy surges from the paper as it is opened. A vision shows a dark-haired swordswoman achieving new heights. She sends a promise of a future, safe meeting. Adrian smiles warmly while reading the heartening personal message. The royal entourage officially departs through the palace gates. Adrian leans out the window, shouting questions about their location. The count scolds the prince for his lack of patience. He commands the restless boy to sit down for an explanation. The crest of the county of Eller is proudly displayed. The region's vast wealth in iron and smithing is showcased. Adrian is delighted to hear about the local weapons industry. He decides it is time to acquire a personal blade. Carls reminds him of the king's standing ban on weaponry. Adrian acknowledges his bad reputation, but remains determined to find a proper weapon outside the royal palace. He gazes thoughtfully out the carriage window as they travel away from the capital. Adrian jokingly warns the scarred, dark-haired Count Balahard that he is actually quite a delicate person. As their long 20-day journey officially begins, the prince complains about a headache while the carriage rolls along the grassy path. A detailed map shows the route passing through the county of Ellen before reaching Iron Lion Castle several days later. The royal entourage continues its steady pace under the bright afternoon sun. Sitting with his arms crossed and a moody expression, Adrian laments being stuck in the carriage for 3 whole days. He finds the car ride boring because Adelia's nervous responses are limited to simple yes or no answers. The prince lets out a long, weary sigh from the sheer monotony of the trip. Adrian decides to stop wasting time and begins to internally inspect the state of his mana heart. He notes that his heart was completely drained after he was forced to use the Song of Dragon Slaying. A sudden, rhythmic rattling of the carriage sounds as Adrian focuses on filling his empty core with mana. He listens to the wind passing by and the distant voices of the knights riding outside. Adrian gathers tiny specks of mana hidden within the surrounding sounds to replenish his strength. He is suddenly interrupted by a strange sensation as his mana begins to swirl violently. Adrian is stunned to see how much his mana heart has changed during his recovery. A notification explains that by attempting an impossible miracle, he glimpsed a fragment of an immense will. He realizes that forcing out the Dragon Song caused a permanent expansion of his internal mana capacity. The system confirms that the expanded mana heart has significantly altered his body's constitution. Adrian learns that his physical form can now endure much higher levels of mana than ever before. Magical chains shatter as he officially reaches the realm of a sword expert and lifts several ability restrictions. A bright flash marks the great improvement of his third eye and third ear authorities. Adelia watches silently as blue mana steam rises from the prince during his intense meditation session. A series of quick, blurring movements show a chibi Adrian testing out his improved physical agility. Smirking with a clenched fist, the prince celebrates taking another significant step forward in his growth. The scene shifts to the grand, white neoclassical architecture of the estate in the county of Ellen. Adrian is formally greeted by the local lords upon his arrival at the massive mansion. Edgar of House Ellen and his eldest son, Torrance, bow deeply while introducing themselves to the prince. Adrian thanks them for the warm welcome as Torrance offers to lead them to his guest room. The prince looks around the lavish interior with a skeptical and unimpressed expression. He observes the many weapons on display, dismissively labeling them as flashy junk that is useless for real combat. The group walks through the wide, polished corridors of the Grand Ellen estate. Adrian continues to scan the rooms, realizing that the high-quality blade he needs won't be found here. He turns to Torrance and asks for confirmation regarding the existence of a smith's guild in the territory. The prince expresses his immediate desire to take a look around the guild's facilities. A quick, firm step sounds as Adrian heads toward the local workshop. Torrance warns the prince that the local smiths are known for being exceptionally rough and stubborn people. He explains that these craftsmen often ignore their own lords when they are focused on their work. A sudden, loud clang of a hammer sounds as Torrance asks Adrian to be generous if the smiths are offensive. He cautions that the heat of the forge is intense and urges the prince to speak up if it becomes too much. Standing in the middle of the busy workshop, Adrian listens as the clanging of metal fills the air from all sides. Torrance looks back at the prince with concern when Adrian suddenly stops walking and stares ahead. Rhythmic thuds and hissing bellows echo through the room as the local smiths hammer away at the glowing steel. A muscular, white-haired man swings a heavy hammer with immense precision and power. Amidst the chaos of the forge, one particular sound rings especially clear to the prince's ears. Adrian watches the elderly mastersmith with wide, fascinated eyes as the man works at the anvil. The tanned and scarred smith remains completely absorbed in his craft, ignoring the royal visitor. A brilliant spark flies as the hammer makes perfect contact with the orange-hot metal. Adrian's gaze intensifies as he feels a profound connection to the quality of the work before him. He stares at a glowing, finished blade, realizing it represents the very first true memory he can recall. Adrian is startled as someone begins to wipe the beads of sweat from his forehead. Adelia notes that the prince is sweating quite a bit while holding a white cloth to his face. The prince remains intensely focused on the smith's work as the rhythmic clanging continues. He glances sideways while his loyal attendant continues to dab at his face. Amidst the orange glow of the busy forge, the clanging of metal on metal rings out again and again. A man in a green cap bows low, offering the respects of the guild's lowly folk to the royal visitor. Lord Edgar introduces the man as Saxon, the head of the local smith's guild. A sudden, booming clang from the master smith's anvil makes Saxon jump in surprise. Saxon shouts at the smith to stop working immediately and show proper respect to the prince. Adrian's expression darkens with annoyance at the loud interruption of the master's rhythm. With a swift motion, the prince silences Saxon by firmly clamping a hand over the man's mouth. He coldly orders the guildmaster to be quiet as the other craftsmen watch in stunned silence. The orange-hot metal sits steaming on the anvil, waiting for the next strike. Adrian points out that the workers were forced to stop mid-task against his wishes. He warns that the cooling steel will ruin the work and tells them to keep the fires burning. Panicked, the smiths shout for their tools and bellows to restart the cooling forge. The workshop erupts into chaotic activity as the men hurry back to their stations. Standing with his arms crossed, Adrian resumes his silent observation of the white-haired master. The elderly smith ignores everything, completely absorbed in the dance of his hammer. Another heavy clang sounds as the master's hammer strikes the glowing steel with perfect form. Despite the intense heat and his own exhaustion, the prince watches with wide-eyed fascination. A brilliant spark reflects in Adrian's eye as he witnesses the birth of a blade. Rhythmic, heavy clangs echo through the room as sparks fly from the master's powerful strikes. Adrian stares through the heat and smoke, feeling a strange pull toward the scene. Beaded with sweat, the prince wonders about the unfamiliar, powerful feeling rising within him. His mind is consumed by a single, echoing question about the nature of this sensation. Outside, Edgar explains that the master has been trapped in a cycle of forging and melting swords for months. When Adrian asks if they were failures, the lord simply shrugs, unable to understand the smith's standards. Despite his eccentric behavior, the man's unmatched skill has earned him the title of Master of Swords. Edgar notes that even the flawed blades were masterpieces and worries about the master's lack of sleep. He shares his concern for the aging smith's health while Adrian listens with a grave expression. The sun sets behind the grand estate as a few days pass in quiet routine. True to his word, the prince visits the workshop daily, staying from dawn until late in the evening. The old man continues his tireless labor, his hammer ringing out with a rhythmic clang. Adrian maintains his vigil, watching the process with a level of dedication that matches the smith's. The two remain in a silent, shared space of creation, one working and the other watching. Edgar is surprised that the infamous prince has caused no trouble during his peaceful stay. The day of departure arrives, yet the rhythmic clanging from the master's hammer continues unabated. Adrian takes one last look at the workshop, his expression heavy with unfulfilled expectation. The Master of Swords strikes again, his focus remaining entirely on the metal beneath his hammer. With a weary sigh, Adrian admits he had hoped to see the final product before leaving. He turns away from the forge, looking downward with a sense of disappointment. A feeling of deep regret washes over the prince as he prepares to move on.
Count Balerhard announces it is to be time to depart and reminds the group of the upcoming farewell banquet. Edgar watches the prince, perhaps sharing in the somber mood of the moment.
An urgent, breathless call for the prince suddenly breaks the quiet of the afternoon. Adrian pauses at the carriage door, looking back in surprise at the sudden interruption. Running at full speed, Edgar shouts the news that the master has finally finished his work. The prince gasps as a sudden divine light breaks through the clouds above the workshop. High on the terrace, the white-haired master raises a gleaming, finished sword toward the sun's fading light. A hand carefully wipes the length of the blade. The silver sword gleams brilliantly against the sun. Light trails through the colorful evening sky.
Kneeling, the master smith presents the sword to Adrian.
The prince's eyes reflect in the polished steel. He formally offers the masterwork to the prince. Lord Edgar watches the presentation with great surprise. The smith speaks of heating metal like the sun. Adrian receives the weapon, admiring its perfect craftsmanship. He asks if the masterwork has a name. The smith suggests naming the blade Dwamaran. They discuss the different meanings of twilight. Adrian laughs, finding the smith's words quite eloquent. The elderly man chuckles softly and returns. Relieved that the work is finished, the prince gasps as a sudden, heavy thud sounds when the exhausted smith collapses. Adrian quickly moves to catch the falling master. He supports the man as the others watch. Knights guard the campsite under the moonlight. Adrian remains bedside as the master smith sleeps. The master wakes, recalling the prince's vigil. Adrian asks about the sword's chosen birth. He leans in to whisper a secret. The master smith stares in pure, wide-eyed shock. He questions the prince's true nature and receives confirmation. A weary sigh escapes the elderly man. He finds a sense of peace in the truth. The master admits that he finally understands. He asks to see the sword once more. Adrian presents the hilt to the dying man. A trembling hand grips the sword's hilt tightly. He begins to offer a final, solemn blessing. He wishes for the sword's greatness to match Adrian's. Adrian listens to the man's fading words. Grasping the smith's hand, the prince gives his word. He watches as the master's strength leaves him. The master smith passes away peacefully in the tent. The crescent moon shines over the silent landscape. Two knights stand guard outside the master's tent. A new, ornate sword rests in a box. Edgar worries the masterwork is unsuitable for a prince. He offers a magic sword as a replacement. Adrian praises it as a fine, mid-grade weapon. He decides to keep both of the gifts. Edgar's expression becomes strained by the unexpected outcome. He feigns honor at the prince's royal praise. Edgar internally laments losing his magic sword for nothing. The group prepares to depart from the county. Adrian readies his horse for the long journey.
Balerhard observes that the prince seems quite dizzy.
He explains his absence was due to royal orders. Adrian contemplates that his trip hasn't been free. Balerhard warns they must ride hard tonight. Adrian admits he cannot ride a horse. Balerhard stares in stunned, sweaty silence. A gentle breeze stirs the quiet landscape. Adrian reflects on his previous life as a sword. He struggles comically to stay on his mount. The chaotic journey continues with more riding failures. Adrian leans against his horse, utterly drained. They finally arrive at the Iron Lion Castle. Adrian gazes up at the massive stone fortress. A rhythmic clatter of armored boots sounds. York of House Willowden offers a boisterous greeting. Adrian finds their fighting spirit quite overbearing. He notes the clear reason for their hostility. A dark-haired knight steps forward with sharp focus. Adrian calls out to the knight named Arwen. Arwen greets her prince with deep respect. She kneels, expressing her long-awaited reunion. The other knights seethe with visible rage.
Adelia stands nearby, emitting a dark aura.
Adrian worries their hostility will provoke Adelia. He places a calming hand on Adelia's shoulder. Adelia is startled out of her trance. She immediately returns to her obedient, humble persona.
Adrian smiles as he prepares his next move.
He commands Arwen to accompany him alone. He mocks the angry knights while inviting them. Adrian readies himself with a wooden training sword. He challenges the knights to show their skill.
The training grounds fall into a hesitant silence.
Adrian acknowledges that his royal position is burdensome. He offers total immunity for any sparring results. He taunts their lack of courage and spirit. A red-haired knight named Dale steps forward.
Dale humblebrags while asking for permission to fight.
Adrian dismisses the need for any formal permission. Dale charges forward with a thunderous roar. Adrian watches the incoming attack with cold eyes. A massive collision of wooden blades erupts. Dale is sent flying with a pained grunt. A faint blue light flickers within Adrian's chest. The onlookers stare in pure, wide-eyed shock. Paul is defeated even faster than Dale was. Multiple high-ranking trainees fall to Adrian's speed. Adrian's movements create a storm of splinters. Shards of wood rain down in the courtyard. Adrian stands victoriously among his fallen opponents. He looks downward with a sense of disappointment. Nearby knights whisper about his overwhelming power. Adrian calls out to the knight named Arwen. Arwen accepts her prince's command to accompany him. Arwen responds with a small, knowing smile. She kneels respectfully as the surrounding knights watch. A knight in ornate armor suggests a wager to Adrian. Looking over the fallen knights, the man proposes a bet. Adrian immediately and coldly rejects the knight's proposal. He declares that Arwen is not a prize to be won. Adrian drops his wooden sword and calls for Carl's. He decides to set a new stake for their duel. Adrian offers the masterpiece sword as the new prize. Arwen's face is filled with absolute shock. The knight reacts with visible, sweating surprise. Adrian reassures Arwen that she is far more valuable. He claims a swordmaster's worth outweighs any blade. Grinning, the knight accepts the high-stakes duel. He identifies himself as Dunham of House Fahrenheit. Adrian mockingly points out Dunham's lower skill level. Dunham reveals his sword is a work of the master. Adrian is amused by the unexpected coincidence. Their hands tighten around their respective sword hilts. Adrian reveals his blade is the master's 100th work. Dunham is stunned, unaware such a sword existed. Dunham unleashes his power to face the prince properly. Adrian mockingly echoes Dunham's critique of his path. A brilliant blue aura erupts from Adrian's chest. Adrian reflects on the nature of his royal status. He claims respect should belong to his loyal people. Adrian commands a startled Adelia to watch him closely. He stands as the epicenter of a massive mana flare. Adrian vows to lead Adelia on a new path. Adelia is consumed by an intense golden light. She pledges her total obedience to the prince. A steaming cup of tea rests on the table. Two men discuss their frequent visits to the castle. The dark-haired commander considers the political landscape. They review the movements of the various princes. He acknowledges Adrian's position as the legitimate heir. The other man blames the commander for Adrian's isolation. They recall Adrian's former life of social exile. The commander is questioned about his sudden protective behavior. He internally reflects on how he abandoned his nephew. He remembers a younger Adrian's descent into tyranny. The commander recalls striking the prince for his vices. The young prince responded with pure, unbridled rage. He recounts the prince's violent attack against him. The uncle saw the murderous intent in Adrian's eyes. He recalls receiving poisoned wine from his own nephew. The commander's hand grips the bottle in memory. A final glimpse of the treacherous gift remains. The commander recalls burning the poisoned wine with his mana and, in doing so, destroying the last remnants of his family bond with Adrian. He reflects on how the delinquent prince, whom he thought would never change, began to transform through relentless daily training.
The brown-haired companion reminds the commander of his own previous claim that the first prince must never take the throne.
A reflection of Adrian's intense training ripples in the commander's tea as he grips a napkin with suppressed emotion. The commander internally acknowledges that the boy has become an entirely different person. He pleads with his companion to give the prince a fair chance to compete alongside the other heirs. Lowering his head in a desperate plea, the commander begs for help as the brown-haired man reacts with stunned silence.
The brown-haired man admits his confusion, finding the situation increasingly difficult to understand.
He notes that both the commander and the first prince seem to have undergone a profound change. A sudden, loud bang sounds as a green-haired knight bursts into the room, urging the silver lion to hold his head high. Both men are startled by the knight's urgent report concerning the first prince. Walking toward the Iron Lion castle, the companion dismisses any concerns, confident that Dunham will exercise restraint during the duel. He argues that even in a serious duel, no knight would dare to truly harm a member of the royal family. The commander turns back with a grim expression, suggesting that the companion should be more worried about his own knight than the prince.
The brown-haired man finds the commander's behavior increasingly odd and unsettling.
A thunderous crash echoes as a knight is sent spiraling across the training grounds. Dunham lies defeated on the grass as his horrified master calls out his name in disbelief. The surrounding crowd erupts in cheers as they realize the prince has secured another victory, this time against a high-ranking knight. The commander smugly reminds his stunned companion that he had warned him about the prince's new strength.
Surrounded by swirling blue mana, Adrian wipes his mouth and fiercely calls for his next opponent.
A new challenger unleashes a powerful aura, fueled by the realization that a knight's true power only begins after mastering 2 mana rings. Adrian stands his ground, focusing his mana as the intensity of the duel reaches a fever pitch. The 2 warriors clash at incredible speeds, their movements becoming a blur of steel and blue light. Adrian realizes his current sparring technique is insufficient, yet he hesitates to use his most lethal skills against fellow knights. A system notification confirms the activation of his super concentration trait as he readies a precise counterstrike. As the noise of the battlefield fades into the background, Adrian enters a state of absolute focus while his opponent charges. He grips his sword with such intensity that his body feels as if it is moving on its own. A familiar, powerful sensation surges through Adrian as he prepares to unleash a devastating blow. He skillfully evades a high-speed thrust, shifting his weight for a final decisive move. A massive explosion of mana erupts as their blades collide in the center of the dash courtyard. The force of the impact sends the knight flying backward, leaving the spectators in a state of utter shock. Adrian wipes blood from his lip with a confident smirk, his fighting spirit still burning bright. Standing amidst the fallen, he calls for the next challenger, while the onlookers cheer for his 5-win streak. Another clash of wood and steel rings out as Adrian continues his dominant display of skill. He maintains a calm, focused expression as the battle continues to rage around him. Adrian parries a desperate strike, catching his opponent completely off guard. A sharp crack sounds as his wooden blade connects with its target. He pivots with graceful speed, his blue aura trailing behind him like a comet. With a final, powerful swing, Adrian disarms his opponent and sends him crashing into the dirt.
Multiple trainees fall in rapid succession as Adrian's movements become a storm of splinters and blue light.
A sudden, brilliant flare of mana signals a significant breakthrough in his combat prowess. Adrian's eyes glow with an intense, otherworldly blue light as he realizes his true potential. The training grounds fall silent as the dust settles, revealing a landscape of defeated knights under the setting sun. Breathing heavily, Adrian gazes at the reflection in his sword, his expression one of grim determination. The knights celebrate the prince's incredible victory over Fetton, marking his 5th consecutive win. Adrian reflects on the hundreds of bouts he has endured, comparing them to standing firm against 1,000 waves. He vows to rise and meet even greater challenges as a system notification announces a new verse added to his technique. The Song of Sparring reaches an extraordinary rank, transforming into a more powerful form to match its new status. Adrian stands tall and victorious, his presence commanding the entire training ground as his mana continues to swirl. A final system notification confirms that his Song of Sparring has officially evolved into the Song of Dueling. Adrian celebrates his success before collapsing from sheer exhaustion.
Carls rushes to Adrian's side as the prince kneels in the dirt.
Carls formally acknowledges the prince's hard-won victory. The assembled knights erupt in cheers, hailing the first prince's fighting spirit. Adrian is bewildered by the sudden shift from hostility to profound respect. Watching from afar, the men observe the knight's simple, honest nature. Count Willadin notes that nothing inspires knights more than a display of martial prowess. He explains to the prince that a fair fight earns respect regardless of the outcome. Nearby knights speculate that Dunham will miss his prized masterpiece sword. Sitting among the men, Adrian finds himself amused by the turn of events. He realizes that despite the changes, some things remain exactly the same. Adrian reflects on how knights always honor the strong and the straightforward. Preparations for departure begin as the group gathers near the royal carriage. Adrian bids a temporary farewell to his hosts with a confident expression. Count Willodin bows deeply as the prince prepares to leave the castle grounds. Stopping mid-stride, Adrian turns back to give a final instruction to the count. He requests total secrecy regarding his visit, much to the count's confusion. Adrian wears a cunning smile as he plots his next move. He identifies a specific target he intends to provoke in the near future. The sky turns a deep orange as evening settles over the land. The traveling party establishes a camp in the woods as night approaches. Carls informs the prince that he will be scouting the perimeter for safety. Arwen stands awkwardly to the side, still adjusting to her new position. Adrian watches her, confident she will adapt to her surroundings in time. A yawning Adrian enters his tent to find Adelia waiting for him. He feels a twinge of guilt seeing a potential swordmaster performing menial chores. Adelia notices his foul mood and timidly asks if she has offended him. Dismissing her concerns, Adrian collapses onto his bed for some much-needed rest. Lying in the dark, he realizes the Iron Lion Order defied all his expectations. He reflects on how most regular knights lack exceptional talent in this era. Adrian considers the fate of those who fade away as ordinary people. He is struck by how the current generation has reached a strange level of parity. The prince considers how the standards for superhumans have drastically declined. Conversely, he notes that the average skill of commoners has significantly increased. Adrian sits up abruptly as he contemplates the nature of mana chains. He remembers his uncle's former greatness and the height of his abandoned potential. A system vision confirms that extraordinary achievements are becoming increasingly rare. Clenching his fist, Adrian accepts that he is living through a shifting tide. A final thought bubble confirms his total lack of understanding of the current era. He resolves to start his training over and master everything from the beginning. A rhythmic clapping sound breaks the silence of the prince's tent. His uncle praises his resolve, encouraging him to pursue his ultimate dream. Adrian is left utterly baffled by his uncle's mention of a dream. The commander notes that Adrian has already successfully won over the Iron Lions. He addresses the prince by his name, Ian, and commends his wise choices. Adrian is internally horrified by his uncle's sudden, uncharacteristic display of affection. He hysterically asks his uncle if he has lost his mind or forgotten their wager. Adrian clarifies that the wager regarding the third prince is still ongoing. He points out that by defeating a double-chain knight, he has already met the conditions. The commander agrees to honor his word as he approaches his startled nephew. The blonde prince stares in silent, wide-eyed confusion. Placing a hand on his chest, Count Vale Ballard introduces himself formally as the commander of the Third Legion. Vale solemnly declares his official support for the first prince, while Adrian sits on his bed, desperately questioning what this sudden political move actually means. Adrian's face pales in absolute horror as the reality of the situation sinks in. The royal carriage rattles as Adrian screams from within his tent that he never expressed any desire to be king, while a memory of his uncle gives a cheerful thumbs up in the background. High above the Iron Lion Castle, the prince reflects that his uncle's public declaration was equivalent to dropping a bomb as people begin shouting their congratulations. Surrounded by clapping servants and a golden-haired knight, Adrian stands in the palace looking utterly miserable while the staff celebrate this joyous news for the kingdom. A stir is caused by the arrival of newly assigned royal knights and soldiers bearing the lion crest. A group of solemn new attendants and servants sent directly from the palace begin bustling about the grounds. Adrian looks completely overwhelmed, noting that he has suddenly been thrust into the center of everyone's attention. A sharp, frustrated escapes Adrian as he points out the window, shouting for everyone to be sent back immediately. Carls explains that the new staff arrived by royal order and cannot be sent away, prompting Adrian to demand they at least stay out of his sight. Adrian complains that the palace has become unbearably noisy while his knight and a maid look on with troubled expressions. The heavy curtains of a palace window flutter in the quiet breeze. Slumped in a grand library chair, Adrian exhales a long breath and enjoys a fleeting moment of silence. A sudden, heavy bang echoes as Third Prince Gillian Leonberger kicks the door open, demanding to know if his brother is inside. Adrian looks up from his chair with a dry expression, asking what his brother wants now. Gillian accuses Adrian of being incredibly sneaky for secretly learning swordsmanship from Count Ballard and revealing such grand ambitions. Gillian complains that he was planning to lose their duel in a way that wouldn't be embarrassing, only for Adrian to mockingly reply that the sentiment is touching enough to make him cry. Pointing an accusatory finger, Gillian shouts that Adrian has made a massive mistake and vows to make him pay for the deception. Adrian clutches his head in distress, lamenting that his brother and uncle are both the same, and reiterating that he has zero interest in the throne. A thought bubble confirms that Adrian intends to confront the person who started this mess once again. Vale Ballard maintains a calm, serious expression as Adrian addresses him. Crossing his arms, Adrian tells his uncle he will play along for now, but insists that Vale must pull back when the time is right, because he doesn't want the throne. Vale offers a small smirk as Adrian grumbles about not being consulted first, while the commander asks if the prince is actually worried about the fate of House Ballard. Fierce monsters and werewolves loom in the shadows of the northern mountains, where the Ballard family serves as the kingdom's shield. Vale explains that as long as the royals and nobles remember the harshness of winter, House Ballard will remain safe and respected. Adrian admits his relief at the explanation, while Vale notes that this shift in power was bound to happen eventually. Standing tall, Vale asks Adrian if he truly understands the grim fate of an eldest son who fails to inherit the throne, warning him that hiding away won't change his destiny. Turning to leave, Vale offers the prince time to accept the news, but leaves him with a final, chilling warning. Vale asserts that an eldest son's legitimacy is a permanent burden that only disappears upon his death, leaving Adrian in a somber silence. Exhaling a weary sigh, Adrian sits alone on his bed, resolving that he will never change his mind, because his only true goal is reclaiming the transcendent power he once held. Adrian stares ahead with cold determination, deciding that a mere right to a throne is too small a thing to care about. Bright lights illuminate a grand ballroom filled with noble guests in elegant attire. A rhythmic, steady tapping sounds as a pair of polished boots walk across the red carpet, signaling the arrival of the rightful royal blood. A herald loudly announces the entrance of First Prince Adrian Leonberger. Dressed in a magnificent red and black royal suit, Adrian walks onto the balcony while the guests below watch him with dark, judgmental eyes. Among the crowd, an orange-haired boy smiles brightly while a man with a wineglass and a mysterious hooded woman look on with hidden intent. Standing in the crowd, Vale Ballard watches his nephew with a sharp, calculating gaze. From beneath her purple hood, a silver-haired woman offers a knowing, enigmatic smile. Adrian stands at the railing with a stoic, regal presence, looking down at the gathered nobility,